republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Your computer.
It's Chelmsford Telemedia.
You're muted, right?
All right, this meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we're not allowing for in-person public participation, interested community members were encouraged to submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through the GoToMeeting platform and expressed an interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll read their questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So, welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. We have a very busy agenda tonight, so we're going to get started right away. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting on December 1st.
I recommend the school committee approve the meeting minutes from December
First.
1st.
Second.
Okay, any corrections of the minutes? Okay, all in favor of approval? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Okay, let's see, any good news?
Yeah, and I just also wanted to bring up the fact that I did speak to our student representatives. They're willing to remote in with a discussion that we should have. I know they can't see us, but they said that they would be happy to participate and start giving some of the updates at CHS. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee. And then for good news, there's nothing specific. A lot of the schools are gearing up. You'll see a lot of the creativity that's happening as people, again, thinking outside of the box as we enter into the holiday season. What are some of the activities that some of the kids can do that they typically have? You'll notice that this is a big time of year for our concerts. So rather than having the in-person concerts, they've put together a nice prelude of like the past concerts that have happened. So that's available for people to watch. They can see that on Chelmsford Telemedia. They can also see that through our Facebook page. I highly recommend that people sign up for our Chelmsford Public Schools Facebook page and Twitter, because a lot of these events that happen at the school are always posted there. So again, the school's just coming up with some of their spirit weeks and the excitement that are happening throughout now and before we go on to our winter break.
Okay, anybody else with any good news they want to share? Okay, we're now at our first public comment section, but I believe we don't have anybody in the line for tonight.
No, we didn't have any request.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to new business. So just to mention, we have several presentations on tonight's agenda, and so we've asked different people to log on to GoToMeeting at different times. So we may kind of adjust the agenda as we go along, depending upon what the time is and how things are going. So, if we need to stop an item to move on to a new speaker, or if we need to do some items later in the agenda, we'll do that.
Yeah, that'd be fine. First item on the agenda this evening, we have a presentation from some of our district and Chelmsford High School staff in regards to an innovation pathways program that they've been working on at Chelmsford High School. So we have our science coordinator, John Morris, social studies and social sciences coordinator, Stephanie Quinn, and then our technology coordinator, Marilyn Sweeney, with us. And what I will do is welcome you, obviously, turn the meeting over to you. You can go ahead and unmute your, just the three of you can unmute your mic so that you can speak when you are speaking. And would you like me to advance the slides for you, or would you like me to just share the screen so you can?
Let's see if they can hear us.
Say
Feel free
again.
to share the screen and we can advance.
All right, then hang on one second. Okay, so all three of you have the screen sharing rights. Sorry about that.
Catchy.
So you can go right ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, Steph, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to start us out tonight. We're going to talk to you all about the Innovation Pathways program that we've been working on for about a year and a half at this point. We successfully were guaranteed a grant just a few weeks ago of over $22,000 to get started on the planning process so that we would be able to implement this program next year. And I'm just looking at how to advance the slides and it's not showing up for me. So my apologies. John, are you able to advance the slides? Thank you. So Innovation Pathways, I'm sure this is new to a lot of people, but DESE and many districts throughout the state have actually gone in this direction in terms of creating innovation pathways that are focused on different careers or industry sectors that are of high need in the state of Massachusetts. So we want to provide our students with as much opportunity, not only to be college ready, but certainly to be career ready. And the Innovation Pathways program, working with DESE and working with some of our local community business outlets is going to help us to do that for our students. We want to create pathways that are going to offer both learning and experience for students in these industries. These innovation pathways are really designed to help us create strong partnerships with some area businesses and with our mass hire boards that look to develop and create training opportunities for individuals to feed those high needs industry sectors. John, you want to advance that slide and then I can get into kind of why we're going to do it. Thank you. So why are we pursuing this? Well, the Chelmsford High School really wants to make sure that we are creating as many opportunities as possible for students to not only be college ready, but be career ready. And this is one way in which we can help many of our students become ready to enter industry as soon as possible. We really want to make sure that we can, that we can offer students new and creative ways to meet with businesses, to participate in internships at the end of the innovation pathway, and to take courses that are specifically designed to provide some knowledge and skill and technical training for them. So that's really going to be our goal. There are 5 different priorities that Innovation Pathways have, and so we might be looking to expand later on, but for this upcoming school year, we're looking to start out with 2 Innovation Pathways, one in business and finance and one in information technology. So John's going to talk about why we're going to focus on those 2.
Thank you, Stephanie. So as Stephanie just said, this upcoming fall, we're looking to have 2 innovation pathways available to students in information technology and business and finance. In each pathway, students are expected to complete 2 technical courses and 2 advanced courses. I think it is important to note that each course listed here is already currently offered at Chelmsford High School. I think that's something that a lot of other districts that are looking to pursue this type of avenue have had to move things around, create new courses, do more alignment. However, we already have these courses in place. So now what we do is our focus moves into taking these courses and creating a clearer avenue, an actual sequence, so that students are college and career ready within these domains, even more so than we already prepared them for. So on the last slide, we had courses listed. What this slide does, it gives us a rough idea of the progression students could follow to meet the criteria. So if we look at the business and finance pathway, we have currently identified marketing and accounting as the technical courses that students would take. And just based on our enrollments this year, we have several freshmen already enrolled in those classes as we have in the past. Looking at the advanced courses, we have business careers, management, and AP stats, or AP statistics. As a side note, students only need to complete 2 of the advanced classes. However, based on what we've presented to DESE so far, we have 3 here, so that it does give us a little bit of leeway what a student could complete for that. If we look at over to the right for the information technology, our introduction to programming and our introduction to engineering PLTW, those would serve as our technical courses. And then for advanced, we'd look at computer science principles and AP Computer Science A for the advanced. So one thing to see in both these pathways, you can see at the bottom, there is an internship or a capstone requirement for their senior year. And this is where the partnership with a professional organization comes into play. We plan on partnering with Workers Credit Union for the business and finance pathway. And at this time, we are still exploring a partner for the information pathway. Finally, we really want to highlight the middle column here, where all students, regardless of entering a pathway or not, will have a 1-credit dual enrollment course with Middlesex Community College in grade 9 and also again in grade 10. These courses focus on college and career planning and give students a unique opportunity to earn 2 free credits with Middlesex Community College. I can't stress enough that we are already really looking to make great strides in a comprehensive career and college preparation setup. And when I also look at this dual enrollment option, even though it's only 2 credits, if you look over the last 3 years, we've gone from 58 students to 208 students to almost 350 students taking dual enrollment at Chelmsford High. So this year alone, you're looking at over 1,000 credits at Middlesex Community College. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dr. Marilyn Sweeney just to talk a little bit about specifically the courses within these pathways.
Thank you, John. Students pursuing the business and finance pathway and taking the marketing, accounting, business careers, and management courses will develop creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, financial accounting, communication, and collaboration skills required by careers in any business organization. They will be involved in authentic marketing tasks with the Lions Locker School Store and management tasks planning, leading, and organizing for success, including legal and ethical considerations and decision-making. Students will gain an overview of what makes businesses function effectively and the importance of the role each organizational department plays while examining where the student themselves would potentially fit in as a career. For the information technology pathway, that is filled with Project Lead the Way courses, which is one of our partners. Students taking the programming Introduction to Engineering, Computer Science Principles, and AP Computer Science courses will develop skills in C, C++, Java, JavaScript, and Python languages. Students will learn to create apps, problem solve real-world engineering issues, analyze large data sets, and be familiar with how computers process information. They will design 3D objects and print them, as well as reverse engineer simple devices. Students will be well prepared to major in computer science or engineering in college, as well as to use these coding skills in the internship program and future careers. Thank you.
And now Stephanie's going to tell us a little bit about the timeline of what we had in the past and what to look forward to throughout this process.
So like we said, this has been a work in progress throughout the course of the year, and we've had a lot of support from different levels of the high school and its central administration to get this going in the right direction. As I said earlier, we received a planning grant from Jesse that's going to help us provide professional development and support the work that we need. A lot of our administrators and teachers do to really understand how we can move this program forward and make the best possible opportunities for our students available. We also submitted the first portion of the grant. It's a two-portion grant. It was accepted in November. We were told right before Thanksgiving break, actually, that we were accepted for the first part of the grant and that now we need to work on the second part of the planning. So we're going to be doing a lot of that work from December, currently now, through January and February, and the next part is going to be due on February 11th. So this is a massive production that we're going to be taking part of and making sure that we have many, many aspects of this program figured out and determined ahead of time. So that's gonna, we're gonna submit that on February 11th. But the planning is gonna continue beyond that date. We're gonna continue to work with Jesse. I know John, Bobby, and myself, because Dean Lyons is a significant portion of this effort as well. We'll be participating in a lot of different webinars and exercises with Jesse and with some of their community partners We also meet quite frequently with the Mass Hire Board of Greater Lowell and Mr. Peter Farkas. And we'll continue to work towards is assuring up our business and IT partnerships. We want to make sure that we're not only just working on developing this program, that we're advertising it and informing the community about this program as well and the benefits that it can offer for our students. So we will be making some kind of presentation for 8th grade parents night and connecting with our 8th grade guidance counselors as well at both McCarthy and Parker to communicate the value of this program and the opportunities that lie ahead for students when they come to Chelmsford High School.
So that is the information we have of where we currently are up to now, and our contact info is here if you have any follow-up questions for us, some other comments, or even just want to know a little bit more about the partnerships from a community aspect. You can see our contact information here, but we would love to take any questions that you have for us at this time.
Anybody have any questions? Maria?
So when we look at these course offerings here, first of all, I mean, it sounds wonderful that you would get students thinking about this from day one of entering high school, because it looks to me like if you're taking these courses, you've got to plan pretty well from your freshman year what you're going to be doing going forward. And that's a lot to ask of a student who's entering the freshman year. So do we have some plan internally on how we're going to counsel these students, how we're going to tell them, okay, these are options here, and this is the pathway you would have to follow? Because I know, for instance, personally, that I've had experience with, to get into AP statistics, you might have a waiting line, or, it's not always available to you. So there's got to be a pretty good plan going in from the beginning. So what are you thinking of in terms of that? What are you going to do?
So I can take part of that question. So we've actually been doing some training ourselves, both John, myself, we have a guidance counselor and a high school teacher who are working together to receive some training through DESE's MyCap to make sure that we can put a plan in place that provides the specific supports for students who are participating in this program. There's also ways in which students who might want to enter their sophomore year, we would have that opportunity and flexibility to support them through this programming. We're still working out a lot of those details, Maria, so I really appreciate that question. But that's going to be a lot of our work, just designing that, but supports for our students to make sure this is an accessible program for all students, and it's not just seen as an advanced placement or advanced type activity for anyone, is really important to us. So we're certainly going to be working on that feature and that component, those support components for students, so that they're not, asked to remember what courses they need to sign up for and hope they get in. That we're really going to have those courses and those supports in place as they develop through. We're looking to design this as a cohort model. So if you've done any work through cohort, you know that there's a lot of emphasis on supporting the entire group and developing community relationships among the group of students that go through this program. And so we'll have those additional supports in place too, so that they're not having to, keep track of everything and think of everything on their own. They're really hopefully going to feel very supported through this program from freshman year through senior year.
Okay, and is guidance involved in any way and already planning on this? Because it seems to me that they would be the first people who would be talking about the courses with the students. At least that's been my experience so far. The other question I have is computer science principles in AP Computer Science A. Is that already offered?
Yes, all of those courses are currently offered, and we do have full courses.
Okay, thank you.
They're either AP or Project Lead the Way, depending upon which one you were talking about. Project Lead the Way is the AP Computer Science Principles. It's a survey course dealing with app development and web design and internet security.
Donnie, you had a question?
Yes, sorry, it was just a follow-up to Maria's question about, having kids come into their freshman year, and although I know we may be looking at having upperclassmen join this program as well at some point, but, that it's a lot to ask them to make a decision, in their 9th grade year. Have we thought about extending Naviance to the 8th grade so they could do some of the interest inventory work? To see if maybe that was something that, they may want to consider, some things that they could be doing on their own or with their guidance counselor? Because I think there is a lot of interest, like kind of.
It is, I don't know if Naviance would be the better route to go for
Okay,
8th graders.
I
only
was just a thought, yeah.
Yeah, we could probably look into some other type of ways to do like interest surveys.
Yeah.
But we haven't gone that far as to pull in Naviance at the 8th grade level.
I don't know, it's just a
I do
thought.
agree.
Sorry, yes, hi.
Stephanie's
Sorry,
raising her
Stephanie.
hand nicely,
Yeah.
and so wasn't Marilyn.
No, I was just going to say that we've actually met with the 8th grade guidance counselors already as well, because we want them to be as involved in keeping them up to date on this program as we possibly can be. And we're looking at using that 9th and 10th grade single credit course as a way to really help the students make those determinations about what fields they might be interested in, and do some self-reflection and goal setting as well. So a student they may just take marketing their freshman year, and then be able to enter the program their sophomore year.
That's
So
great.
we're going to try to create as many on and off ramps per se for students, because students may change their mind, and we recognize that. But so we want to be flexible, but also have a strong and clear pathway for students so that they can feel supported throughout.
That's fantastic, thank you very much.
So I do have one,
Maria,
I'm sorry.
Marilyn, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I did some research today because we want to include the current freshmen. And in these introductory courses, which is where the students really explore and decide if they like these, they don't know about the pathways yet, but they know about the business department and the computer science department and Project Lead the Way courses. In accounting, we currently have 12 freshmen taking the course this year. In marketing, we currently have 16 freshman students taking the course throughout the year. Programming 1, we have 3 students. That really is a little more difficult, and more students join us in 10th grade. And the Introduction to Engineering Project Lead the Way course is a total of 11 freshmen. So they would already have a jump start on this program.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'm sorry, Maria, go ahead.
You're
No,
okay?
I just saw her, she wanted to mention something. I wasn't trying to cut you off.
Oh, okay. It's going to, in light of what Donna just said in terms of going down to the 8th grade level, I think when I saw the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, what was missing in there, if you didn't know somebody already in the high school that you could just talk with about what courses you wanted to take, what you might want to pursue going forward and so on, because as we can see, things are getting more and more specialized as you're making your decisions, then you were kind of just left to, not just, but you had to get in contact with a guidance counselor. You had to talk to a guidance counselor. And also when these 8th graders talk to a freshman or a sophomore or even a senior, it's very different from talking to the guidance counselor or somebody else at the school. So I was going to suggest to you maybe thinking about forming some kind of mentoring in the academic sense between students. From maybe a senior who's gone through the pathway or a freshman who's entering your pathway, talking to a incoming and going to be transitioning 8th grader, and forming something like that so that they're already into it as they go into the high school and have thought about it. I have one other question though, and it's this. If the student has entered this pathway, what's the off point? Let's say they decide they don't want to do it, and it's already junior year. They want to do a totally different thing. They want to be an English major. So what are they going to do?
That's a great question. So part of our design process is we have to look at Specifically, if a student wants to, let's say, jump off sophomore year, junior year, or even senior year, that they just don't want to do an internship or a capstone program within the class they've been taking, this does not affect their ability to meet the Mass core requirements.
Okay.
I think one thing that is nice to know is a student could complete this entire pathway and they still are taking other AP courses, or they are taking some other dual enrollment courses, or they're taking other electives they have an interest in. This does not prohibit them from doing that. And that, like you said, a student, things can change, right? High school kids can definitely change, that junior year, senior year, they just find another interest, find another passion. But as Stephanie said, it's also a cohort model. So there's a lot of supports that we try to build in. I was fortunate enough this morning to be part of a professional learning community with other districts who are in the same step in the process with us, with the Department of Education. And this issue actually came up of how do you tackle students who may want to take the off ramp, or how do you tackle students who just don't feel like they're making progress, or just aren't really feeling that they want to be a part of this anymore. And these are some of the questions we are going to have to tackle. But I think the stronger we make a true cohort model for the students in the pathway, regardless of the grade, but also that sense of being part of the community within the school and how they can link to a business partner, and seeing that endpoint where you are going to get this experience and you are going to have a definite place to do that internship come senior year, linked to all this hard work you did. Our hope is that many more students than not would want to continue on the pathway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to my question is going to be, is this going to tie into the internship program that we were trying to get off the ground last year, but obviously weren't able to do that?
Absolutely. So we had students who were looking at their own options. They were exploring different, we'll say, like community partners, different businesses, different companies, trying to find those internships. What's nice about this, what sets us apart, is that we have these partners already lined up direct to this content area. So we'd have Workers Credit Union for the business and finance. So our students come senior year who've completed this pathway, they are guaranteed to have their internship with sharing some professional information of what's happened at the workplace, so that when the student does come senior year, they have something focused for that specific internship.
And right now we're looking to, just get us off the ground, but we hope over the next few years to develop real relationships with other community partners too, so that we'll have even more opportunities and offerings for students to participate in internships.
Are students that aren't part of this pathway still going to be able to do an internship type program?
Yeah.
All right, John?
Yeah, just real quick. I wanted to say I'm really glad to see the focus on information technology. The business is obviously important, but I work in information technology, and the world is full of problems that technology can solve, and hopefully some Chelmsford kids can. I'm also looking forward to seeing who you end up partnering with, because Massachusetts is a great place to have any kind of high-tech background. So thank you for putting the program together.
All right, anybody else? Any questions?
I just think it's an outstanding program. Thank you for all of your work.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to see that we're both addressing the college and career aspects. For students, I think it gives them more options to be able to pursue what it is that they're going to do after high school. And I think this is just a terrific program. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree, thank you.
John,
Thank you.
Stephanie, and Marilyn, thank you very much for representing. They did put a tremendous amount of work into this program. The application was very competitive. Now they're entering the second competitive round, as they mentioned earlier. So they're putting a lot of time into this. I think it's going to really pay off well. It's going to solidify our dual enrollment program, our internship program. It kind of brings all three pieces together. So we're really looking forward to the work. And thank you again, guys, for working on this and then presenting it to us tonight as well.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Do me a favor, please, the three of you. I made you organize it, so when you leave the meeting, just leave, don't end it, because that would close the link. So if you just end the meeting for yourself, we'll be good. All right, moving on to the second item on the agenda this evening. We have Bill Silver, Director of Technology, here to join us. I think Bill will be proud. I haven't had too many technical glitches here tonight, but Bill is going to actually, I'm going to share rights with Bill so that he can share his screen and PowerPoint with us. Obviously, we've been doing a tremendous amount of work this school year with technology, trying to support our staff and students at home as we've been forced into doing some kind of remote and hybrid learning. Bill and his group have done a phenomenal job of just trying to keep up with all the demands, and Bill is here to give us some updates with regard to what's happened at the beginning of the school year. So Bill, we're happy to have you. Bill, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, you just cut out for a moment. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Just going to share my my screen here. I think you all have a copy of this this document. Just a quick technology update for you. Okay, we'll get this going. Okay, so thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak with you all whenever we get the chance. It doesn't always fit in perfectly, and this year has certainly been pretty busy, and we finally got some time here to get this in, so thank you. Obviously, technology has been, quite the department to be part of this year, and I just want to start out by saying how, really fantastic every single one of my department members have been this year. My technicians, integration specialists, tech instructors, librarians, library staff. It's just been amazing to watch them work and really help so many, teachers, administrators, parents, students. It's just been something to see, and I'm very proud of all of them. And I just wanted to make sure that I started out with that and let them know how fantastic they've done this year. So let me take you just through a few project updates. Some things that we worked on over the summer and some things that will continue. One of the first projects we started this summer were to add some more clear touch panels to classrooms. So this summer we saw 80 new panels come in, and that was a significant increase. We always try to put these in to where our one-to-one classes are expanding. And so we got all of those classes taken care of. We were also able to go into the elementary schools and install down into the second grade this year. And then with the school reopening money, we were actually just able to install 115 additional panels. So now, we're talking almost 200 panels that have gone in. We've outfitted every single teaching space and every single school, which is amazing. Those, these devices are so helpful when it comes to running meets, Google Meets that teachers are running on a daily basis, and they're just fantastic for the teachers to have. They've been very, very well received since we started this program a couple of years ago, and this was just the icing on the cake to be able to have one in every single instructional space. Another component that we worked on, and many of you have probably experienced some of this, it's been so difficult to actually acquire technology, and especially in the quantities that we've needed it. So we were scrounging every place trying to get some web cameras so that we could set up a really nice synchronous learning model for our teachers and students this year. We were lucky enough to be able to secure, probably a couple of hundred cameras. That got us off the ground this year and allowed everyone to be able to have live meetings with their classes, which was great. We also took advantage of the Google Enterprise licensing this year, so that allowed us to use an enhanced feature set. We can do things like breakout rooms in the Google Meets. We can run polls. Teachers have a variety of different controls that weren't there without the enterprise licensing. So that came out probably almost a couple months ago now, and that's been a real game changer for teachers. Also over the summer, we installed additional bandwidth, and I know I had seen this come up at a couple of the school committee meetings. Did we have enough bandwidth? So 2 years ago, we put in 2 gigs of internet bandwidth, which was an upgrade from our 500 megabit connection. This summer, we added 10 gigabits of bandwidth to that too. So we have more than enough at this point to do anything that we would need to do. It's just an amazing amount of bandwidth. So it's very robust. You know, we have sort of redone that whole network infrastructure over the past several years. You know, and things really do hum along. You know, are things perfect every single day? No, you know, we run into issues with Google occasionally. We've had a couple of blips on our side, but usually these things are overcome pretty quickly and people can get on about their business. So we've been fortunate to this point, knock on wood, and hopefully we will not have any full days down. We've just had these kind of small blips here and there. Not sure how well you'll be able to see this, so I'll just try to explain it to you. But going along with the bandwidth, there's some reporting metrics through our Google management system. And this allows us to really take snapshots about what's happening with meets, how data is transferring, and how well everything is performing. So at the time of this snapshot, we had run somewhere around almost 46,000 Google Meets. And on an average across all of those meets, we had 4% network congestion, and Google recommends that you be less than or equal to 10%. We had 0% packet loss, and Google recommends that you're under 3. And we had 10 milliseconds of jitter, which is really like the latency or how quickly packets flow between the clients and Google. They recommend that you be under 20 milliseconds for that, and we were always right around 10. And so that's just like a big average, and then we can actually dive in deeper into each meet. And we can see for the time that a specific class met, like this is data from just a random sample that I pulled. The class had 2% network congestion, very fast round trip time, small amount of jitter, and then we can also see things like the client CPU usage and these other metrics. And you know, it just really helps us kind of narrow down where could a problem be stemming from. A lot of times what we do see is the client CPU load becomes overwhelmed because folks will be running a meet. They'll also try to run a video. They'll also try to run, you know, a third tab of something, and Google Classroom's open, and the devices can only do so many things at one time. So that usually allows us to sort of at least talk to the user and tell them, you know, maybe we can back down a couple of the other tabs and try to help them have a better experience overall. And I won't try to share the rest of those. I think they're too small, but we can see the same thing with audio, video, and how that transfers. So it's just some really good tools in the background that really help us sort of focus in on exactly how we can help our students and teachers. Okay, on to Chromebooks. This year, we were lucky to be able to get our one-to-one devices this summer. So we did get those. They were prepared, and we did a handout on those to grade 5 and 9 students prior to the opening of school. At the same time we were working on that, we were dismantling all of the Chromebook carts in the district. And then we made those devices available to anyone who needed technology this year. So we handed out slightly over 3,000 devices from those carts this summer. And it was just a huge project. And but we got through it, and you know, parents were so great to work with and so appreciative when they came to the schools to receive devices. It was overall just a great experience, and I think we did a really good job preparing families for you know, hybrid and remote learning this year. We were able to just secure another 3,000 devices. We got a grant from the department, well, from the state, and that was for about $260,000. And then the town did make some of the school reopening funding available to the school, so we were able to get some additional funding from there, which was great. So we have 3,000 units. Those are actually at our vendor in their warehouse that finally arrived. They're being asset tagged at this point, and I'll be putting out a survey because you know, there were a lot of families who really helped us at back to school and just allowed students to use devices that they had at home. We will now be able to make additional devices available. And I'll be putting out a form for parents to fill out probably right after the first of the year. So anyone who needs something will be able to fill out the form, and then we'll make arrangements to do a deployment of these additional devices that we've been able to secure. Okay, we also did security upgrades this summer. Chelmsford High School was the one facility that we really spent a lot of time at. We added just over 100 new views to that building. And I think that Principal Murray and the deans are very excited about that. There really are no more blind spots there. They have such a good view all over, inside and outside of the building. So they can really keep tabs on what's happening there. We also were able to install additional badge readers, swipe card access, door unlock mechanisms. We received a grant, a Safer Schools grant, which paid for many additional swipe card readers to be put in. So those are great because wherever staff or happen to park, they can have an easier way to enter the building. And sort of the long-term plan for that was ultimately we'd really love to be able to have students carry badges, so we never have to unlock a door at all at the building, and everyone that's supposed to be there will carry the credentials to have them enter the building. In addition, we did some work at the Westlands as well, and that's still in process. We aren't wrapped up there, but it's getting closer and closer daily. The last I heard, we're looking at the week right after Christmas for a last push to try to get everything completed there. And that's going to be great. That had some really old cameras. It wasn't easy to see a lot of things there. Now we have, again, internal and external. We have beautiful views of all the parent pickup and drop off areas, so we can see all the cars that come through. So I think that's going to be really well received at that building as well. Last year, USAC made a little bit more E-rate money available. So there was just a 5-year funding cycle, and then there was like this lag year, and then we began a new 5-year funding cycle this year. In this lag year, they made 20% of our last 5-year funding available to us. So we applied for and received the funding to be able to do some additional cabling and outdoor Wi-Fi at the building. So all of the cabling was run this past month, and we'll be installing the outdoor access points, and those will be ready to go for springtime, which will be great. So if people want to get outside the building, they're still going to get great connectivity outside. And we also put in a new help request and inventory system this summer. Before, we just had sort of a generic kind of free help desk system, if you will. Our new one is much more advanced. It's able to tie inventory to the people who use it. Makes it very simplistic for people to put in tickets. They can click a couple of categories, give us a good bit of information about what they need help with. It also pulls information from our internal systems, like what building they're in, room numbers and things like that, which make it much quicker for us staff to sort of track down where folks are, and we can get to them faster, obviously, making us much more efficient. So the group, since we stood this up in, probably middle of August, they've closed about 6,000 tickets. That's amongst all of our technical staff, which is just mind-boggling. And they've had basically an average of 2.4 days from opening of the ticket to completion of it. So some of those things get held open and they sort of skew that average, but it's very good, it's very fast type of response time that folks are getting. Okay, so that was sort of all the project components, and I'll pause there quickly. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those, and if not, we can continue to move on.
Any questions on the projects or the?
No, I'm just gonna wait till we get to the end.
I'll wait till the end.
Okay. All right, everybody will wait till the end, Bill.
Okay, sounds good. So the next piece is tech integration and professional development. So, this is one of the biggest things that we're responsible for in technology. And obviously, every single teacher this year has to do so much with technology. Even the support staff, our paraprofessionals, our folks who maybe didn't have to do these types of things in the past, we're really being called on this year to be able to connect and engage with students. So we've done an awful lot in the area of professional development. So I'll just give you a couple of the recaps here. We ran a graduate level blended learning class. This isn't the first time we've run this. We've been running it for a few years. We had 18 participants. I have no idea how they, taught and prepared all their lessons and things like that and still fit in a graduate class. Good for them. I'm not sure how they did it, but 18 of them finished that course this fall. To date, we've had about 120 teachers go through our blended learning class, and it's really paying off because, especially this year, we can see how, we go from direct instruction and teachers are able to push kids on to other types of learning and see students taking responsibility for some of their learning. They have choice in some of their learning. So it's really paying dividends, and we're actually preparing an enhanced course, a second course that builds off of this first one. And I think teachers are really excited for that to come out. We also had 10 full day PD days before schools opened. We had TISs in every single building, librarians, library staff, tech instructors. Everybody was sort of involved in these first 10 PD days. And we did a lot of training with the new ClearTouch displays and a lot of training about, how to run a Google Meet, how to, get the camera rolling, how to just sort of make your classroom come together to be able to do synchronous learning. And we were able to train every single grade level, every specialist, every service provider. Everyone had an opportunity for training, which was great. A big thing that the technology integration specialists have done this year is we began to offer daily professional development opportunities. So this is crucial, and so this is offered every single day of the week. So far, there have been over 300 learning opportunities made available to staff, which is amazing. And what's great is, the integration specialists sort of, they have a good handle on what's happening in their buildings, but they're also able to take information that they receive from staff and then tailor their professional development to exactly what staff is asking for. So I think this has been fantastic for teachers, and I know that they're very appreciative of this. One other thing that we sort of discussed as a group was how we were going to deal with the Wednesdays, which folks are allowed to be remote on that day, and all students are remote on that day. So we were a little bit nervous about how would some of these things go. If people needed help, how would they get help? What we ended up doing was making a Google Meet that stays open all day, and it's staffed by the integration specialist from like 7:30 until about 3:30 in the afternoon. And teachers can just join this every single Wednesday. They know what the code is, and they can come right in and get instant help, live help, anytime that they need it on Wednesdays. And that's been really great, to be able to very quickly give teachers what they need. Of course, we've had some half-day PD. We were able to do some training this year for paraprofessionals, which was great. They've been receiving some Google training this year, and there's still more work to do there with that group, but they really appreciate it, and they've done very well with what we've been able to show them so far. And we also had actually curriculum coordinators picked out like a piece of technology that really worked well in their departments, and they did a whole bunch of things with teachers on one of our other half-day PDs. And that was great. It's always nice to be able to have a coordinator who really knows exactly what's happening in every single classroom and what their teachers could really benefit from. So that was super. And then one other nice piece we put together this year on the website, there's a tips and tricks for 2020 section. Thankfully, that's almost over. But
Yeah.
There are so many great videos that have been made by our integration specialists. There's all kinds of guides there for students, for parents, what to do if something happens. I just think it's a really great resource, and I know it's been very helpful to a lot of families this year. Okay. And then just quickly, some upcoming components. So we have MCAS and access testing. January MCAS testing was sort of pushed off by the Department of Education, as you all know, but they do plan to have it in the spring. And access testing kicks off here this winter, and we're all prepared and ready to go for that. We'll be entering our next iReady diagnostic window. In fact, I think we already have. So the students in K to 8 will all get their next diagnostic, and then, the teachers will get the results from that. And that's so helpful for the teachers because it really lets them know, what are the standards that the kids are really doing well with, where are they struggling, and how can they best sort of insert themselves to help students. So it's a great product, and the curriculum department does a very nice job with that. Okay. We talked already about the grant and the extra devices and reprovisioning Chromebook cards. So, that's sort of some of the upcoming pieces short term in the year. In the summertime, we'll be redeploying all of our carts that we've taken apart with all the devices that come back. Those will all be earmarked to elementary this year. We'll do another one-to-one device distribution for grades 5 and 9. And the extra devices, I'm very certain we'll have enough of these, and we'd like to have grades 8 and 12 as well. So essentially 5 to 12 next year, we'll have a device. The 8th and 12th graders will be a used device that we've already used at some point in the school district, but it will at least give everyone in those grade levels the opportunity to experience the sort of the one-to-one atmosphere. And then next summer's security upgrades. Right now, that's part of the capital planning committee, and hopefully town meeting will fund this. But this will be the last leg of our security upgrades. So the middle schools were done, high school is done this year, and this summer will be all 4 elementary schools. So that is where we're at and where we're going. And that was a lot, so thank you for being patient.
John, you had a question?
I'll let John go first.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, that list is pretty extensive, and you and your team have just done an impressive amount of work this year, and it goes without saying that none of this year happens. Talk about technology solving problems, right, from the earlier part of the session. But yeah, just great work, and I'm glad we have this team. That's all.
Thank you.
Yep, Donna.
Yes, I'd like to echo what John said. I think your team has done a tremendous job in every aspect of this whole process. It's been overwhelming, to say the least, and I think that you and your department have done a tremendous job, and I can't thank you enough for your efforts. One question I did have is, do we have, I didn't know where we were at with devices for staff, if we had a plan for that yet. And Bill, I didn't know if you had any information on that.
Yeah, so we were able to make some devices available to staff. Once all the student deployments were done, anything that was left over, we allowed staff to come and pick them up from the libraries. And we are working towards acquiring more staff devices. Like everything, it has been very, very difficult to acquire more than a handful of devices at a time. So we did learn a couple days ago that there may be some coming available shortly. So we are looking at a way that we might be able to secure those. So do they have access? Yes. If they didn't have a Chromebook, they had at least a PC in their classroom. Many of them had the Clear Touch with the Chromebox attached to it. And our hope is that we can get everyone fully mobile with a laptop in pretty short order.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Jeff.
Sure.
I'd just like to agree with John and Donna. You guys have done a wonderful job in a very difficult time. And I'd like to say that hopefully it'll get easier. But thank you.
So I think, Bill, that No question, it's been an incredible year. Look at this report. It shows how much work your entire team and yourself that you have put into it. It's amazing. Going forward, it looks like you now have possibly every staff member would be equipped with a Chromebook, is that right? Once you are able to dole them out?
Yeah, if we can secure another round of teacher devices, we buy a little bit higher quality device for teachers. They require some more resources typically. So they've been hard to come by, but if we can acquire them, that is the plan, that every teacher in the district will receive a Chromebook.
That's great. Okay, and for the devices that would go into grades 8 and 12 for next year, those would not be leased, those would be from the existing group of technology we have available? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. So we're going to obviously collect everything at the end of the year. We'll put the carts back together, and then we'll have, I'm sure, additional inventory left over at that point. So everything that is available that's in good working order will then give the opportunity for grade 8 and grade 12 students to use those as if it's a one-to-one device for the rest of the year.
Okay, and then when their year would come up, you would still go back into the lease program? Is that, I'm just thinking of maintenance going forward and that type of thing.
Yes, yeah, let's not confuse the 8th and 12th grade. This is just sort of a byproduct of all of the purchasing that we've done in the past, which is nice. The lease program will always continue, and we'll continue a new lease for grade 5 and grade 9 every single year.
Okay.
And just continue that on, until there's some other great new thing that comes out and we migrate to that.
That's right. And for the other thing I thought was great in this report is the fact that you're aiming for a cart in every elementary school classroom. Because I think once you've tasted technology, if you like it, you don't want to get rid of it. So going forward, that would be important. And the other thing I wanted to make you aware is that we just heard a report that there's a Pathways program coming into the high school, and they're going to learn C, C++, Java, JavaScript, and Python. So they'll be programming everything around you. You'll be all set at the high school level.
Maybe we could hire a couple of them.
There you go. But I really, really, truly want to thank you. I think it's been an amazing amount of work, and bringing it all together. Kudos to you and to the staff.
Yeah, just to echo what everybody said, a great job, and, I just, as I sit here, I think, this time last year, you gave a report, and if we had said to you at that point that you need to deploy clear touch monitors in every single classroom and buy thousands of Chromebooks and set them up for every student in the district and provide professional development to every teacher, you probably would have just laughed at us. But you get it done, which is, it's a credit to you and your staff, so thank you for everything you did.
Yeah, thank you all. I really appreciate all the compliments. Of course, my staff, it's one of the best. I've been doing this a long time. I'm so grateful to have them, and they're really showing their true colors this year. They're very impressive, and I couldn't be more proud of them. So thank you for all the kind words as well.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and Bill, it goes without saying, we say it all the time, thank you again, and you do have an incredible staff who've really stepped up this year. A lot of questions come up meeting to meeting, so you really cover them all in the memo you provided, just to give that overview and look ahead to where we're going. So thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you for your daily work supporting everyone this year.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bill.
Good night.
Jay, can I just ask you a quick follow-up
Me?
question?
Oh, yeah.
I think that sometimes we use teachers, teaching staff, and paraprofessionals, that term interchangeably.
Uh-huh.
So when we're talking about getting devices into all of the teachers' hands, are we talking about paraprofessionals as well?
Yeah, the goal is to have a device in everyone's hands. I don't know the different models that Bill buys for different levels of staff, but no, it's to try to get a device in everyone's hands.
Okay.
I know even this year, like when paras were looking for devices, they were the same as teachers. If they needed a device after we had them deployed to the students, they were able to go to the library and get a device as well. So no, the goal is to have everyone have a device.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else on technology? Okay. All right, next.
All right.
HVAC.
Yeah, third presentation of the evening. We actually have a number of different individuals joining us, so I'll do a couple of quick introductions. And then, as you recall, this past fall, one of the things that the schools in the town had decided to do was an assessment of our HVAC systems. The town took the lead on hiring a contractor to come in and go through our schools, check our different systems, make recommendations for improvements, and they also had a balancing contractor that worked with them. In a nutshell, we went through all the schools to verify all the different equipment we had, also to take a look at filtering, what would recommendations be, and they tested 25% of the rooms. So we basically, the thought process behind that was, if you're in an elementary school and you have, say, the first grade wing all down a particular hallway, typically you have at least 4 or 5 classes. So they obviously checked all 4 classes, but they actually did the balancing and the air testing in one of the rooms. So as the report you're going to hear tonight, the gentleman, Jess Faber from CMTA, who is the engineering group on this firm, he's going to review the report, kind of help us understand how to go about reading it. The town has already taken different steps based on some of the recommendations that are in the report to just make sure our systems are operating functionally for the upcoming winter, that we have the recommended necessary filtering. So what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, Jess from CMTA, if you wanted to turn your camera on, and I'm also going to make you an organizer so that you may share your screen at some point. We have Gary Persichetti from DPW, who may join us for different sections of the report, Kathleen Canavan from DPW, and then also Melissa Joyce, who works with us on a daily basis from DPW, who's controls an HVAC person in the building. But Jess, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We had the ability over the course of the past a number of weeks to actually have a presentation with Jess and our building administrators, our union leadership, to kind of review the report. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Jess, to kind of walk the school committee through the work you did, the report, how to go about reading it, interpreting it, and talk about some of the findings and recommendations that we have underway in the district. So thank you for joining us.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity here to present. Is everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
And let me make sure I'm able to share my screen, because that is key here. Okay, is that okay? Looks like that's popped up.
Yep, so what you can do is just, you can make it a little bit bigger. So if you drag on the item, the viewing audience is also viewing the screen at the same time.
Okay, how's that? Is that a good size?
Yeah, that's good right there, perfect.
Good, good, okay. Well, thank you again for having me here tonight. I'm going to present to you, as the superintendent said, the results of our findings of the work that we've completed over the past several months when it comes to the HVAC assessment related to the pandemic planning that's been ongoing in the town and the district. So it's an extensive report. I'm going to kind of hit the highlights of it and explain to you the important parts of it and what is, the way to kind of structure yourself through it to read it, and hit some of the different elements of the details that we got into as part of the report. So as we said, as the superintendent said in the beginning, we went through every instructional space in the district in every school. So went through all 8 schools. Let me get the screen to move on me. I've got a big lag here. I apologize. I'm not sure why that's happening. Okay, so basically what we did was, again, we went through all the classroom spaces in the schools and some other spaces as well that were identified by the town that needed to be evaluated by us. And as the superintendent said, our focus was looking at ventilation airflows in terms of fresh air that enters those spaces, and then the filtration of those spaces. That's the filter media that cleans the air as it's recirculated through the various HVAC equipment. So that was our focus of what we looked at specifically. And as we said, there was a balancing contractor that joined us and did some of the detailed testing that we'll get into here in a minute. What I'd like to kind of give you the overview is the focus of what we looked at kind of was surrounding several documents that we use in the industry for guidance. And so ASHRAE 62.1 is a code language that we as engineers use. Any building I've designed in the past 25 years, we use this guideline to determine what the acceptable ventilation rates for any spaces, whether it's a classroom or a hospital, you name it. Anything that's in a building is outlined in that code, and we use that as it's a code language, and it's what we have to do as engineers, so I can put my stamp on a drawing and say that it was done right. The other three documents below is guidance that has come to the market since March. So obviously a lot of things have happened since March when it came to COVID and pandemic planning. And so we use all three of these documents, and they all kind of say the same thing in a little bit different way, but in the end result, we're all looking at the ventilation, airflows, and filtration. They all give a little bit of guidance specific to their realm. So Harvard School of Public Health is a fantastic guide that we've used it came out very early onto the scene. That's been used quite a bit that we reference. EPA also has a document called Healthy Indoor Environment for Schools, which is a good document. And then ASHRAE, on top of the code they wrote, had an epidemic task force that gave a lot of guidance from an engineering perspective, but also from an operational perspective, as end users would need to operate their buildings. So as we said, we surveyed the high school, the 2 middle schools, 4 elementary schools, and the community education building. This is really not working with me today. Okay. And so, as we said, we went at about over 400 spaces within all those school buildings. And in those rooms, we just basically, it was a yes or a no kind of thing. We walked into the classroom. Did we feel air movement in and out of those classrooms, which would be a sign that ventilation is occurring and filtration is occurring. And of those rooms, 25% of those are the ones where we did the detailed testing and inspection. So in those rooms, we pulled the filter out, looked at the condition of that. We checked to make sure that the fan speed was where it was supposed to be. We looked at some controls to make sure they functioned the way they were. And then the balance contractor actually took measurements, and the measurements are what we need in order to validate some of the data I'm going to present to you here in a minute. So we actually were able to measure airflow rates in and out of equipment in various spaces, which was very helpful to kind of give a benchmark of where you are as a district and a town in these school buildings. We took that data and we compared it to the ASHRAE 62.1 code book that I mentioned earlier. Again, that's the book that we use that tells me how to do my job. And so we use that as our benchmark to say, do we comply or do we not comply based on a certain set of criteria? So that was key. And then we also looked at some air change calculations, which is a measure of how many times the air is exchanged in a space and in a given period of time. So those we'll show you here in a minute. And then lastly, I want to note that the town has already done quite a bit of items to the schools since this has been ongoing, and one is to upgrade filters. And so there was quite an exercise to do that. Similar to the previous discussion, these things aren't as readily available now because everyone in the United States is in the same situation that you are in, and we're trying to get products in our hands so we can install them. So we've done a great job here getting what we can when we can, and it was actually when we were doing our detailed walkthroughs back in I guess it was in October. It was ongoing then, and we watched some of those occurring then. So it's been ongoing for quite some time. Okay, I'm going to talk you through my executive summary. I apologize for this lag here. I'm not sure what is happening here, but I'm getting really hesitant.
Copies, though.
I'm not sure why.
Just let them know we have copies of it.
Well, he likes to look at it. Yeah, just as you're kind of going through it, we do have a physical copy in front of us.
Okay.
So even though you're having a little bit of lag, it's catching up eventually for the viewing audience.
Okay.
What you might just, with this particular program, at the very bottom of your screen, there's arrows that just actually advance the pages instead of scrolling. You might find that
There you go.
easier for you.
There you go. Okay. All right, so we're to the executive summary section of the report. So again, when we look at what we're doing, the goal of what we did was to validate and increase where we can outdoor air ventilation to the various spaces through the building. And then we looked at adding or increasing air filtration as well to those. And that's guidance that you see in every one of those standards. And that's pretty universal in terms of every entity saying that. And so that was kind of our approach. And again, more of both of those will always be better in the situation we're dealing with right now. So that was effectively what we did. I want to show you this one chart here at the bottom of the page. So when we're talking about HVAC systems and the things that matter, what I'm focused on in my report are the engineering controls to help mitigate risk when it comes to COVID-19. So this triangle shows you big picture what has to happen to control the risk. So the first one here is what we say is elimination. We want to remove the hazard. Well, I think we're all hopeful that come springtime that everyone can get vaccinated is vaccinated, and that risk and that hazard disappears, and over time that'll start to happen. So that's we're not there yet though. So what we have to do is come up with a different way of doing what we're doing. So back to the previous discussion, IT has been a huge part of every school district across the nation when it comes to virtual teaching. So again, that's what everyone's doing is to reduce risk, is to avoid being in the way of it, and that's that step. But if you have to be in the space, we want to look at the engineering controls, and that's the middle yellow bar. Again, looking at air filtration, dilution, more fresh air, and physical barriers, and social distancing fits into that as well, which has been implemented quite a bit in the schools as we walk through them. And then the rest of them, again, is education and PPE. So we're all wearing masks still, and that's going to be ongoing for quite some time. We want to categorize the school buildings here in a couple of different ways. I want to show you first that what the town has done so far. So again, as I said, the town has done quite a bit of strategies to help improve the operation of the HVAC systems. One, the systems run a whole lot longer than they used to, and by doing that, it dilutes the air in the building and helps reduce risk within those spaces. So that's something that was implemented back in March. Additionally, in about 60 locations across the various schools, portable air filtration units were put in to help clean the air. Ongoing, there have been a repair and replacement of various exhaust fans that remove air from those buildings. And as I said before, filtration enhancements have been occurring throughout, and it's still ongoing, and more to do with that. And then, as I said, classroom occupancies have been reduced, and that's really the key strategy here, is to not have large amounts of people in any given space, as we hear all over the news. There's two different basic HVAC systems that you see in your school buildings. One are centralized air handling systems, and primarily we see those at the high school. That has a lot of those roof-mounted HVAC units that heat and cool the space and provide ventilation air to the spaces. The other school buildings have smaller rooftop equipment, more like commercial, which were used for the modular classroom buildings. For that type of equipment, we do have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of being able to increase ventilation air, validate ventilation air, and increase filtration. So again, this is a step that we've identified. It's ongoing in the district right now to improve the filtration levels in the spaces. So there's a picture of one of the rooftop units at the high school that the day we were doing measurements on that unit. The second style of HVAC system you have in the classroom is what's called a unit ventilator. So there are hundreds of these in the district, and pretty much almost every classroom you'll find one of these, either it's sitting on the floor or it's overhead in the ceiling. And this is a very common way that you see HVAC systems all over New England. It's just the way that schools were designed, and that's what you have. So what we're faced with there is increasing filtration levels as well. So again, that's ongoing, and but there's some controls work and ventilation improvements that do need to occur to a number of those, and I'll talk about that more here in a minute. We did observe in some of the classrooms that the tops of the units maybe were impeded and were blocked. Not too many, but we did note some. And again, we recommend that they stay free and clear so that we can really maximize the ventilation optimization in the classroom, just to keep everything unobstructed and maximizing the amount of air turnover we can get in those spaces. Additionally, we recommend that you don't place a student or staff desk within 6 feet of that unit, just again to maintain any to avoid any obstructions that you would see in those spaces. flip to the next page. On to page 9. Trying to go to page 9. There we go. Okay, so there's a picture of the unit ventilator. Again, there are hundreds of these in the district. So as a summary, what we did, we did detailed inspections again of about 100 spaces, which represented about 25% sampling throughout the district. And what we did was we compared the field measurements that were taken by the balance contractor to calculate the ventilation air going to the space, and we compared that to the minimum ventilation rates that the code language tells me I need to design to. So that was step 1. And step 2 was we calculated the overall amount of air exchanges in the space that the equipment was providing. Guidance out there says that if you can have 4 or greater, that's good. So we used 4 as our benchmark for that. So at a district level, again, I'll get more into the details here as we step through this report, but at the very high level in terms of the district, based on reduced occupancy rates, so that's a classroom that has 7 students in it instead of 20 to 25 students in it. So at a reduced occupancy rate, 61% of the rooms we sampled complied with the standards we were benchmarking against. So which means 39% were not. And of those rooms that did comply, the ventilation areas were actually more than double the minimum rates, which is good in terms of the situation we're fighting today. If we were to take those same spaces and put the normal occupancy rates in there, the everyday pre-COVID and post-COVID rates, only 38% of those complied in terms of meeting that minimum ventilation rates. But again, still half of those still exceeded the minimum by quite a bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. And then of the total amount of air going to the room, 72% of the rooms we sampled exceeded the 4 total air changes, and that's the amount of air again that is filtered in the space. So that was a good number to see. So what we kind of boiled down to here was coming up with a list of short-term goals, long-term goals, and immediate next steps. And I'll talk about those here. So short-term goals, we need to do some improvements to the rooftop units at the high school. So the ventilation rates at the high school there were below where we wanted them to be. They need to be improved. McCarthy Middle School was in the same situation as well as South Row. So those are kind of the 3 that stood out that needed the immediate steps. All the schools need something to be done. I don't want you to think that anything was perfect, but those were the 3 that stuck out that needed to be dealt with. District-wide, we want to continue with upgrading filtration, which is ongoing. And district-wide, we want to look at the portable classrooms that have the smaller rooftops and look at ventilation improvements for those. District-wide, we need to make sure all of our exhaust fans were operating. Again, we saw some schools were doing well, some weren't. For various reasons, fans were or weren't on through controls or failed components. And then last resort is if we run into spaces that we simply can't fix quickly, we might need to consider moving staff and students into spaces that are more appropriate for the ventilation and filtration levels that we're trying to obtain in the short term. Long-term goals, we recommend expanding your preventative maintenance plan to include regular ventilation testing so that something like this does happen again, we're better prepared for the situation. Then look at long-term replacement plans for air handling equipment and ventilation system upgrades, which is something the town's doing, but I think we're going to find through the additional evaluation we're going to do that some additional items need to be added to the capital planning, and that'll all come through the next steps that I'll talk about here in a minute. Some of the spaces we went into needed some upgrades for HVAC. We've noted those in the report as well. And then at Byam, Harrington, and the Community Education Building, there's these air plenum cavities that occur behind the unit ventilators that were leaky, that made the measurements we took very difficult. So those need to be repaired and sealed up over time. Again, nothing that has to happen tomorrow, but something that needs to be on the radar for the future as we look at upgrading these buildings. So I've talked a lot here, but I want to give you the immediate next steps of kind of where we need to take this and the steps that the town is already taking to do that. So the majority of the situations we found in terms of the lower ventilation rates are easily solved through a rebalancing effort by a test and balance contractor. So we feel that the bulk of the deficiencies that we found can easily be rectified through a comprehensive rebalance of the entire school district. Our task, what we did was just to measure and quantify what you have today with a certain percentage of those classrooms. In order to do this the right way, now that we know what we know, we need to expand that into a district-wide effort. I've been working with Kathleen and Melissa and company working on some scope to help define that so a contractor can be hired to take you to that next step. So that's really the first step. From there, we will determine if there is anything else that needs to happen mechanically or through equipment or whatever we may find through that extensive effort. As we're doing the testing and balancing at the same time, we need to have the temperature controls vendor that Melissa works with on a daily basis and the mechanical service vendor there to address any issues as they arrive, because what we want to have happen is when the balance contractor is, when he's there doing his job, we want to make sure everything's functional so that he can balance it and walk away and you're done. And that's what we want to have happen with this, with steps. So that's really the next steps. Surveying all the exhaust fans and making them functional through control settings or repairs. Again, that's ongoing, but needs to be done. That's a pretty easy thing to do. We've requested that the daily monitoring of equipment operations still occur through the EMS platform. That's through the web interface, through the temperature controls. That can be done to make sure that temperatures and equipment are operating. That's ongoing. I want to point out, though, that here on item F, in 2017, the systems were rebalanced in a way due to, there were some thermal comfort complaints that occurred in various spaces. So systems were rebalanced in order to eliminate or reduce thermal comfort complaints that were occurring. What's going to happen here more than likely is we're going to undo some of those things and create some of those complaints again that happened back then. And I would just advise that if those complaints do come up, they need to be noted and logged, and in extreme circumstances, maybe something needs to be done with it. I think that it's one of those things that you can't have both of everything all the time. So we can't necessarily guarantee thermal comfort at all times by making sure the ventilation rates are where they need to be. They were reduced in order to solve a problem that was occurring back then. But there may be some situations where you can't get both at the same time due to the limitations of the equipment that we have. So that will surface as we step through these next steps of testing and validation. And then once we get those results, we'll be able to validate that the classroom spaces do all comply with the requirements that we're benchmarking against. And if we do identify some that don't, we can tell you that, hey, this room here in this class or in this school building, for whatever reason, can't meet the requirements that need to be met in order to ventilate. And that room may have to be taken offline. Again, we won't know the details of that until we get past these next steps of the testing scope of work. Okay. Are there any questions about what I've talked about so far? I know that's a lot of information. I've tried to cover. I've got my next part of the presentation is to go through to drill down a little bit more into some detail of the report about some site-specific observations and things like that.
Anybody questions at this point?
Keep going.
Let's try to digest it all. All right. So
I know it's a lot to cover, so I apologize. It is a lot of information, and there is a technical nature to it that if it's not clear to you, just feel free to ask, or we can save those at the end. That's perfectly fine. But I'm just presenting here what we found is really the results of the findings of the data we.
Just for the committee's sake, just having been through this presentation before now, it actually makes more sense to let him do the whole presentation, because when he gets into the metrics piece, it really makes more sense to some of the stuff in the beginning. So again, just from having heard this once, it made a lot more sense to me after I heard you do the whole thing. I would personally just continue on.
Maybe the third and fourth time it'll make perfect sense, right?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, so as I did in the previous presentation that the superintendent is referencing, I'm gonna pick on the high school because it's always the first one to pop up of my list. And the high school was the most complex of all the buildings. Obviously, it's the largest school building you have, and it's quite sprawling. It took us a solid, probably a 10-hour day to do everything we needed to do in that building. And then we had to even go back a following day to get more data. So it's a big building, so it's a lot of ground to cover. So in the school, so what you'll see is you're going to see a similar sheet of paper. Let me zoom out here a little bit so you can see the bigger picture. You're going to see a single sheet for every school building, and they're all structured the same way in terms of telling you, the first part tells you what we did and what we found, and then the second part gives you the high-level recommendations of what needs to happen. So I'm going to step you through the high school just to give you a sense of what the other, so you can get, again, as the superintendent said, to give you a feel for the rest of it. So in the high school, we walked through 122 spaces to determine, you know, to just look at those rooms and see if there was airflow or not in those spaces. And of those 122 rooms, 31 of them we did detailed inspections for, in terms of the looking at the equipment, measuring airflows, et cetera. So 16 of those spaces, of those 31 spaces, were served with the unit ventilators that I referred to in the previous section. So those are the floor mounted units that heat and ventilate the space. Of those 16 units, only 4 of those were not functioning. So statistically, that wasn't too bad. It was, for various reasons, they weren't working. There were some controls that were offline. Again, probably simple things to fix, but it was more of a snapshot in time. We walked in the room, it was either working or it wasn't working, and we made note of it. So 4 of those weren't. So based on normal occupancy levels, so again, if a high school classroom has the 25 or so students in it, 11 of those 16 units were not delivering the appropriate ventilation air to the space, which, again, as I said previously, is fairly easily rectified through rebalancing efforts. At the reduced occupancy level, so at the rates now where you have maybe 7 to 8 people in a classroom, only 4 of those spaces were not delivering the appropriate ventilation air. So a much better statistic, obviously, because the ventilation air requirements are proportional to the number of people that are in the space. So less people gives you better results for that. We inspected the filters and all those pieces of equipment, and they were all in pretty good shape. We found one that was in poor condition, and we left it out of the unit and form maintenance while we were there to have that replaced. So I think that actually got taken care of the day that we were there. So then the other spaces in the high school, so again, 16 of them were unit ventilators. The other spaces were served by those large rooftop units that I showed you in the picture before. So that's what these designations are. This is served by maybe 8 or 9 different rooftop units serving the various spaces throughout the building. Most of these were underperforming in terms of ventilation rates. And it's very common that we see this in buildings as we go through over time. Mechanical systems go out of calibration. It's like your car. You have to keep the calibration up for it to be working at its optimum efficiency. Again, it's through no fault of anyone. It's just that's what happens with mechanical equipment over time. It just goes out of calibration. Again, fairly easily fixed in terms of rebalancing efforts. So of those spaces, 12 of those rooms were not provided the amount of fresh air that they needed. Even at reduced occupancies, 10 spaces were not being delivered the amount of fresh air. So this is really where the focus of the effort needs to be in terms of updating the high school with the test and balance scope. The filters we observed were a mix of good and poor. Again, those are being replaced ongoing by the town and the district as we speak. So that will work itself out through time as filter stock becomes available. As I said earlier, filters are hard to come by now because everybody's doing the same thing, trying to find these things. So you get what you get when you can get it, and you put them in. So that'll take a little bit more time to get through. And then we look at the total air exchange in the space, and of that minimum of 4 air exchanges. So every 15 minutes, 4 air changes means every 15 minutes the room is changed over in that space, which is that air that's going across the filters to clean the air and remove particulate. So 22 of the 31 rooms that we inspected exceeded the 4, which was a good number to see for the high school. And then the high level observations, for the most part, we found that the spaces were all getting air in and out of the spaces, but we did have some exhaust ductwork that was not operational at the time we were there. So again, going through the school, making sure the exhaust fans are functioning, will solve the majority of those problems. So the recommendations for the high school is to continue replacement of the filters, which is ongoing, and these will need to be inspected and replaced more regularly because they are a higher level efficiency. So they will require a little bit more replacement, more than likely, than what you're used to. We want to make sure all the equipment is operational. So again, we found a few units that weren't for various reasons. So we need to make sure that as we step through the building and test it, that all the equipment is functioning and delivering airflow to the spaces. And we recommend rebalancing to the ventilation rates that we've calculated. So we've only calculated 25% of the spaces, and we'll be working with Kathleen and Melissa to update those calculations for the rest of the district as we step through into the next piece of the project, so that every classroom space and every occupied space can be ventilated at the appropriate level. So that's the next, again, that's part of the next step piece. This one requires a lot of vigilance. Item D does. Keeping the units and the exhaust grills free and clear is something that takes daily checking or every other day checking, whether it's through the custodial staff or whomever, that somebody goes in and looks and makes sure there's nothing blocked. Again, we didn't see a tremendous amount of equipment being blocked, but there was enough of it that it needed to be said that let's make sure that they stay free and clear. Again, as we're doing the next testing results, we think that a PM of those units at that same time makes the most sense while the units are taken apart and being rebalanced. So preventative maintenance of those makes sense at that time. And again, as I said before, make sure all the exhaust fans are operational and that they're rebalanced as well. So we'll be providing some guidance on what those numbers need to be as part of the next steps. So that what you're going to find is these recommendations you see here for unit ventilators, it's pretty much the same thing you're going to see for all the schools that needs to be done comprehensively. For the system type for the centralized air handling units, the big rooftop units, again, we recommend upgrading the filters, which is ongoing. There is going to be some retro commissioning and calibration of the DDC controls operationally that needs to occur as we're stepping through all of that, and then rebalancing, doing preventative maintenance of the components. We did see we did make some notes of some things that needed to be done specifically for the units we did open up, and then again making sure the exhaust fans that are tied to those systems are functioning as well. So that's the super high level of the recommendations we provide for each school. So I'm not going to, let me change my view here for just a second. So I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to go through every school and tell you that, but you'll see the same thing for McCarthy. You'll see the same thing for Parker Middle School, Byam, Center, Harrington, South Row, and the Community Education Building. You're going to find a very similar feel to the observations and the write-ups of those schools. So if there's a particular school that interests you, you can go read that page of it and see what it has to say. So that gives you the site-specific school-by-school observations and recommendations for the 8 buildings that we did. The next part of the report, every section I go to in the report drills down a little bit more detail and gets a little bit more into the weeds. So if there are questions, I can try to answer them as I get through this. The next section of the report talks about overall strategies, and I've hit on these kind of as we've been going. I'm not going to get into the details of every one of these because they're probably a little bit more than you really want to hear tonight in terms of the technical nature of some of these. They're more for Melissa and Kathleen's team that they need to know what the options are as we go through these. But they all work around the idea of increasing and validating outdoor air ventilation rates, and there's some steps we take to make sure that some strategies that we need to do to make sure that we're good there. So that's what the first few pages are with some diagrams. The second section of the strategies has to do with increasing indoor air filtration. Again, so you're doing that already. We need to continue that with improving the ventilation rates. Strategy 2, for example, put in portable HEPA units. You've already done that in a lot of the spaces. So that's a good step that's already been implemented that is ongoing. And then there's also some other technologies out there. If we get into it, this is kind of the last resort. If for some reason we have a space that we can't fix the filtration or we can't get the ventilation right, we might look to some other technologies to clean the air. Again, that's usually the last resort when I'm looking at school buildings, because they're complicated and maintenance they can be a hassle too. The next section of the report gets into the ventilation calculations, and this might help make a little bit more, some of the other previous stuff I've said make a little bit more sense. So this next section of the report steps through, again, every school building in the district, and gives you the methodology and the calculations that we did to say that a room complied or didn't comply. This kind of is where the stats came from that I presented in the executive summary. So we're going to pick on the high school again because it's first on the list. So what you're going to see is these are all the spaces that we did the detailed inspection. So this represents the 25% number of those spaces within the classroom. So for the most part, they were classroom spaces, but the town had also identified a few office spaces and the health and nurse spaces, some other just spaces that they wanted us to look at while we were doing it. So that's what we did. So that's what the first column is. The second column is the type of room that it was. So again, it's a classroom, it's a locker room, it's an office, a media center. This column here defines the parameters that we use to do the calculations to determine the ventilation rates. This column here is the floor area of a classroom. So for instance, classroom 104, that room is 888 square feet in size. That's the floor area of that space. And so that is a quantity we have to know in order to do our calculations as well. That's a function of the formula that we need to use to do those calculations. This column here is the occupancy, the number of people in a particular space. So for the typical classroom, we use 24. You're going to see there was a lecture hall that's quite larger. It could hold 95 people. Media center can hold 31 people. But for the most part, we just focus on the classrooms. That's the easiest thing to talk about. 24 students and a teacher in a classroom is the occupancy of those in terms of the typical number of people that would be in there. And when I use this information, that then there's a bunch of behind the scenes formulas that calculate this number right here, the code minimum ventilation airflow. So this tells me that I need 435 cubic feet of air every minute in a classroom to provide the acceptable ventilation air quality levels in the space. So this is the number, this is the target we're shooting for. This is what we want to see as a minimum in those classroom spaces, or any of the spaces for that matter. This column here is what we actually measured the day we were out there, okay? So what you're going to find is, pick on classroom 104, we only measured 106 cubic feet per minute of airflow into that space. We're looking for 435, which is a deficit. So that classroom is only getting 24.3% of the ventilation air through that. And that's the amount of fresh air that's being delivered through the HVAC unit that's sitting on the floor. That's what that's telling you there. So when you add up, when you look through these columns here, if you see anything that's below 100, it didn't comply. Anything above 100 exceeded it. And so some exceeded it by quite a bit. But for the most part, the high school, we saw the needed the most work in terms of the rebalancing effort. But again, like I said earlier, through a systematic rebalancing of the equipment and the systems, this will solve many of these situations we see here very easily and very quickly, as a matter of fact, once we can get the contractor on board to do the work. This column here measures the total amount of air going into the space. So the ventilation air is a portion of the total air that's being supplied to the space. Excuse me. So in this particular classroom, we measured 879 cubic feet per air. That's the total amount of air that's going through the ventilator and being filtered. And that gave us a air change rate of 6.6. Again, we're looking for a minimum of 4. So this exceeded that number by quite a bit. So that's a good thing. And then this comment here just says this particular classroom was served by a rooftop unit number 17. And if you read through the rest of the charts, it kind of gives you the same flavor. So for instance, classroom 238, with 747 square feet, has 24 students normally. It needed 330. The day we were there, it was off. It wasn't working for whatever reason. I think we had a control communication error that day. So that room wasn't even working and the unit ventilator was inoperable. Again, that's probably a pretty easy thing to repair. And Melissa, maybe she's already fixed it by now, I don't know. But those things some of these are gonna be pretty easy to fix. And as we do the details, we'll find out some that might be a little more complicated, but like I've said, by and large, we're going to be able to fix this pretty easily with the balancing work. The second page of this takes the same building. So this is Chelmsford High School again, and we ran the numbers at the reduced occupancy rate. So it's the exact same calculations, but with the lesser amount of students and staff in the building that you're seeing right now during the pandemic. You're not filling up these classrooms to full occupancy, so we're doing a reduced occupancy. Even then, you can see that classroom 104 wasn't hitting the bar. You know, we were close, a lot closer because we have less people in there, but still had a ways to go to get to the number we needed to get to. So that's the kind of the behind the scenes calculation piece that we did in order to come up with the overall stats of what the district as a whole was doing, to say that 70% or 60% of the classrooms were meeting those minimum rates. So again, stepping through the rest of the report, you see the same thing for McCarthy. This is McCarthy Middle School at the normal occupancy rates. Same methodology was used. Again, these airflows were measured by the test and balance contractor while we were there that day. The second page takes that same school and cuts the students' population and staff population down to a reduced rate. Again, and then it gives you the different benchmark for those calculations. And then we did the same for Parker. We did the same for Byam. So when we get to the elementary school level, those are much smaller buildings, so there's much fewer rooms that we tested. So that both of those charts fit on one sheet, so you can kind of get a good comparison of, for instance, classroom 2, 875 square feet. It was well over. We were looking for 315 cubic feet per minute, but it was being delivered 456. So that's a good thing. And even at the reduced occupancy, it goes even higher. So again, we saw some good, we saw some bad, as would be expected in a district of your size. You have an awful lot of inventory of school buildings. Center Elementary School, again, same calculations. Harrington, South Row, Community Education. So that gives you the high level overview of the calculations we did to get to the stats I presented in the executive summary level. So then the next part of the report gets into the actual field reports. This is the notes that we took the day or days we were on site doing our work. So again, you're going to find a very similar structure to this report. So I'm going to pick on the high school. So the high school, you see just some general information and just some high level overview of what's in that school from a mechanical perspective. And then what you're going to find is, again, we went into every single room in that building, every space. There was over 100 spaces we went into, and we went in physically to say, is there air movement in those spaces? So you're going to find, yes is good. Yes. So for the most part, the rooms we went into, there was air movement. You find a few strays that were no from the exhaust perspective, but again, a snapshot in time, this is what we found, this is what we noted. It could be different today as items have been repaired and fixed. Again, there's another page of the just more and more classrooms that we did. There's more and more, again, the high school being quite large. And then there's a detailed chart that gets a little bit more into the weeds. Here's some of the measurements we took. We did some inspections of the controls and the filter. And again, this is just capturing the data that we collected the day or days we were doing the evaluation. And then we included some photographs for these typical buildings. So just to show you what we found. There's the filter we found that was really dirty. But for the most part, they're unit ventilators, and that's just what those pictures are showing, and some rooftop equipment. Whoops. Oh, man. Hang on. I hit the wrong button. Go back to the high school. Sorry about that. Okay, so then there's the second page of the high school. Again, here's some of the insides of the rooftop equipment, just to show just a visual of what we found the day we were there. And then what you'll find is there's the same type of report format for McCarthy Middle School. So we have details of what we found and some pictures. We have Parker, we did the same thing with some pictures. Byam, Center, Harrington, South Row. Here's a kind of a cool picture I like to show you. We did we did a little bit of thermal imaging the day we were here. It turned out to be a cold day. That actually the first day we did our testing, it wasn't that cold outside, but you can see here that this unit, the red denotes that it's basically being a radiator and producing quite a bit of heat to the space, which was interesting thing just to get a picture of while we were there. In the community education building, again, there's the details for that. Again, a lot of information is contained there that is probably a little bit more detailed than you want to know right now, but that's effectively how we captured the data in order to report back to the front of the report with the overall overview of what the schools were doing. Then the last section of the report is really half the report is this last section. This is the reports that the test and balance contractor, that was not my company, that was a parallel company that the town hired that we worked together on this to put this all together. That's their report. So this is the data that I needed in order to do the calculations to give you the snapshot in time of where you are as a district. So this is super into the weeds of what's going on in all the school buildings, but it's there for reference because it makes the report whole. What we're suggesting is that a balance contractor, whether it's this company or a different company, come in and expand that service to the rest of the school district. So that is a high-level overview of the report. Again, I know there's a lot of information there that I covered fairly quickly. If there are questions or comments or clarifications, I'm happy to try to answer those at this time.
All right, anybody have any questions? I think we're all overwhelmed at this point.
I'm sorry. I know it's a lot of stuff. I apologize for that. It took us a lot of time to put it together, so there's a lot going on here. But I think if I could just boil it down, I really truly believe that through this next effort of testing and balancing effort that the town is about to start on, that I think you're going to see those stats go way up and solve, again, the vast majority of the situations we found. The goal of what we're trying to do is make sure that we just have the right amount of ventilation air going to the classroom spaces when you go back to normal occupancy, which may not even, who knows if that'll even happen next year at the rate we're going. It may or may not, but you will be at a reduced occupancy for quite some time. But that's just, there's nothing that, there's nothing we can do. It's one of those is what it is kind of things right now. Really, the only other thing you could do if you were worried about it is start opening up all your windows in your classrooms. Again, that just creates a lot of nuisances and temperature complaints because it's going to be, it's going to be cold outside here, especially this week. The temperature's dropping, so it's going to be harder to control some of those thermal comforts that people are accustomed to. So, again, if there are other questions, you can ask. You can ask now, or if you have follow-up questions, I'm here to help you in any way that I can to try to make this make sense.
I thought it was an excellent and very detailed report, and I thought your explanation was very helpful in being able to sort through all of this information.
Thank you. It is a lot.
I guess our next steps are.
I mean, like as a takeaway, next step-wise, this was obviously key to just get a sense for averages, kind of ballpark what's happening in the district. And again, this was really kind of very detailed data for 25% of the classrooms. But what we need to do now is kind of go back and take a look at 100% of the classrooms. And as Jess had indicated, and I think that previously we'd said like 90 to 95% of the issues as far as like how much fresh air you're supposed to have in, how much is supposed to be recirculated, would be resolved by rebalancing the system. And I think a lot of the steps, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you're correct, 100% correct with that. Sorry.
So in the scheme of things, those are relatively easy things to do. The town is already, working with Jess's group to, kind of re-engage them for the project, looking at a balancing company to be able to come in and begin to do that with us. But what would happen this time is instead of going into a room and doing that like snap snapshot in time of what's going on, they would actually balance the room right then and then move on to the next room. So in the end, yes, you will get a report. And I think what will be important is we'll be able to take a look at these 25% of classrooms in that final report and then show, how based on the rebalancing, they're now, say, 100% accurate. You'll be able to look at the other 75% of rooms and show that, even though we didn't look at them the first time, now they are balanced to what we wanted. One of the issues, and Jess did bring this up earlier, that we just have to kind of struggle with or find the balance to is some of the rooms are not bringing in as much outside fresh air because a couple of years back the system was basically programmed to not open the dampers as much because we were getting some complaints from staff. And I think he was just mentioning we can't kind of have it both ways. And right now with the COVID and the pandemic and needing to get fresh air into the buildings, we're going to have to open up some additional fresh air coming into classrooms. We're going to have to work with a control company to try to temper that air as it's coming in. But this winter is going to be in a little bit of flux. I think it is going to help significantly to have the rooms balanced, though. So I think that is significant, having the contractor come on board and do 100% of the rooms at the same time. The town just is kind of, even prior to this, like interim steps for this coming year. They have a company that's in the district usually 2 days a week doing kind of break fix if something is broken. The town's already increased that contract, so someone's here every day of the week in case something breaks. The control contractor used to be on contract every other week to do control tweaking. Now they're in the district 2 days a week as well to be able to work with the mechanical contractor and Jess and the balancers group. So the town really is taking all the necessary steps to work on this. Any of the equipment that was identified, even in the 25% of classrooms, some equipment just was off, so it might need to be turned on. Some equipment might be functional, but the control was telling it not to, turn on based on whatever the condition is. Like that's all being, kind of resolved at this point in time. So, over the next, month or so, when they're doing this rebalancing, a lot of those issues are going to be addressed. And, as an absolute worst case scenario, if there's a particular problem with the room, there's a piece of mechanical equipment that's broken that we just can't fix in the short term. Not that we have the luxury, but right now, we do have some open classrooms in buildings where we can relocate a classroom if we had to, and I think that was a suggestion, until we can get that room up and functioning the way that it's supposed to. This was outlined in the memo that was on the top of the report, but all these different steps are, currently in the works. The town DPW, town manager Cohen, very supportive and involved with these remedies. I do think, again, next steps with CMTA and the balancing group is going to be able to resolve a lot of these, just kind of quick issues. And that work can all be happening over the couple of weeks that we're off as well during the holiday break. So when people aren't in the buildings, so this is being worked on. But I think, again, kind of seeing this now for a second time, it's nice to be able to, delve a little bit deeper into sections 4, 5, and 6 of the report to know how they pertain to the first part. So when you go through and read it a second time, it does start to make a lot more sense. But overall, I thought it was a very good presentation. I appreciate you sharing that with us tonight. And, the work to make these short and long-term improvements is in process.
Any other questions that people have?
So I guess I just a couple. So just to reiterate, okay, any spaces, so everything is, I know Jess said in part of his report, I mean, no matter what we do, there's not 100% guarantee, right, that we're going to be able to make sure that, that everything is 100% safe. But, the rooms are safe right now.
Yeah, the rooms are safe. I think and I don't think he necessarily said they weren't safe. It's a matter of, are they programmed and they controlled to have whatever the recommended, fresh air intake into the rooms is. That's what needs to be reprogrammed or recontrolled, and then that'll be measured and balanced.
When we do the rebalancing and then we have the heat issues,
Mm-hmm.
What steps will we take to be able to kind of mitigate some of the problems that we're going to face as a result of that? Because we don't want to end up back in the same situation where we had, it was just impossible to be in a classroom because it was so cold.
Mm-hmm.
What will we do? Will we move teachers? Will, how are we gonna track this so that way we can make sure that, we're getting the information and making the necessary changes?
Yeah, Jess, I don't know if you want to jump in and just kind of talk historically. I can tell you a little bit like in Chelmsford. That's what's going to be important between the balancer, just to make sure that, number one, we have the right amount of air coming in, because even in some of these classrooms right now, we have too much coming in, right? So if everything is readjusted to the, the 100% mark where we want it to be, that is going to actually, I think, help the entire system out so that we don't have one room having too much air, one room not having enough air, so it will be balanced. It'll be critical that the controls group is also involved, so that we're able to, again, kind of temper the air to what we want it to be. The equipment is older, though, in the facilities, and I think we have to acknowledge that, it's not all brand-new equipment, and it's not going to be precise to a particular set point. But if someone is uncomfortable or cold, obviously, we're going to have to track that. We potentially may have to move someone if it's a continual concern. And again, right now, we kind of have that luxury because we don't have everyone in the buildings. But we'll have to have the reporting system in place. We'll have to, rely heavily on the custodians kind of letting us know what's happening. But I think it really does, and again, this is what was discussed, particularly this year, with the conditions we're in. We've upgraded the filters. We're going to continue that. We're going to change it out quicker. We have to introduce the right amount of outside air into the buildings, and that's just going to be an ongoing project for this winter. And Jess, I don't know if you want to jump in more on that.
I think I'm going to hire you to come work for me. That was good. That was a good summary. No, I think you're right. There's definitely, those are all the steps that need to be taken. I think some of the issues that you could have encountered back in 2017 was that rooms maybe were over ventilated, which were causing the cold air coming in. I really think that could have been part of the problem. You just didn't know it at the time. So until we really get in there and get them balanced the way they're supposed to be, we're gonna have to really log where those issues come into play and then make good choices. Once we know if a particular room is a problem, can we fix it in a way that will make the thermal comfort complaint go away, or maybe that person has to move. I mean, it's going to be hard to really say, but it could be either of those two choices.
Thank you.
To follow up on Donna, how are we going to share this information with the staff so that they know this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is what might happen, we're going to try, how are we going to make sure everybody's on board with, what's going to happen?
Right. Well, I think part of the whole communication piece is, when we got this report, we did have a meeting with the building administrators because they get just a lot of the questions and concerns from staff. We invited the new union leadership in to kind of hear about the report, some of the findings. I think they found that helpful, just in case they get questions from staff, how to go about, interpreting, reading this information. But as we go along, the various elements, so, we get the contractors on board. And again, I'm not speaking for others involved here, but it's going to be a systematic school by school kind of rebalancing effort. So, the staff will be able to be notified prior to, say, the week that they're going to be in the building working. If it's working during the school day when we're going to have kids and staff, a lot of this work will have to probably be second shift. Obviously, if it's happening during a vacation week and no one's there, it wouldn't impact them. But they can get a message ahead of time saying, hey, listen, our school's up this week. Here's what's going to be happening. We're going to have a crew in the building from, 1 to 9 o'clock. If after your room is balanced, if you're having issues, you have any concerns, here's the point person you need to notify so that we can try to resolve as many issues that come up while the group is still there. And there's always going to be, something that breaks after the fact or a control issue. Someone's a little too hot, someone's a little too cold. The senior custodian in the building is going to be the point of contact to at least get the data into our ticketing system so it can be tracked and monitored and repaired. But, we can work on a communication strategy building by building as they go. I think that makes the most sense just so that people can know when their particular room or building is being worked on. And obviously what to do if you're, not satisfied or uncomfortable with a condition that the room was left in after the fact. Who to go to, how to get something remedied.
Other questions?
When I initially read the report, particularly in the last section with the balancing, I was kind of a little taken aback, and I guess, I'm thinking of it from a safe, not safe, kind of perspective, and so I want to make sure that we're getting the message out to people, because, when we're talking about rebalancing, again, I go back to, is it safe, not safe? I don't really know what that means in terms of, I don't think it can be distilled down to that, I guess is what I'm saying. But I think that that is the message that we have to get across to people that, you know, that it is, you know, things, that things are, you know, as safe as we can have them be, and we're working on making them safer.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of taking the recommendations from the report, taking the kind of the industry standards on exactly how much fresh air should be coming into a room, as opposed to, you know, some of those rooms that are exchanging the air more than the 4 times, you know, they're recycling and filtering the air, but what we want to do is actually introduce more fresh air into the building and have less recycling. And again, correct me, Jess, if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's where the balancing kind of comes into play. We need to just, in some of those rooms, refresh air, and I mean have fresh air coming in instead of recirculating and recycling.
That's 100% correct. We're trying to make sure that that proportion of fresh air that comes from outdoors is placed into the room where the occupants are, as well as the amount of being filtered totally in that space. So both of those are what have to happen.
So, to be honest, when you first read this report, and have the people who are working in the buildings already read the report, had access, or is this the first time that it's public?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's been on the website. People can access the
Okay,
report
great.
if they wanted to.
Okay, so when we first look at it, and it says 61% of the rooms, I'm looking at the high school, sampled are provided with mechanical minimum ventilation, it's a bit scary, because only 61% of the rooms are, and it's only a sample. So I think, you know, the concern for a lot of people will be, am I safe where I am? And Donna already raised this about the safety level, and how quickly is it gonna go to 100%, so that, you know, we know we're in the best conditions possible. So the next step now is hire contractors to get the work done?
Yeah, I don't know if at this point, maybe if, you know, Melissa or Kathleen or anyone wants to jump in, but I know that so the town is basically re-engaging the firm, Jess's group, who had done this work, as well as the balancing company, to be able to go in and balance 100% of the rooms. The 25% of the rooms that they went into, they didn't balance. They were basically trying to do a snapshot in time, tell me what's actually happening in the
Right.
system. Now they need to go in and actually just set the control, so it tells how much fresh air to come in, how much is going to be circulated. So they just need to go room by room through the system and now do that. But we want
Okay.
them to do that in 100% of the rooms, not just the 25% of the rooms that they went through.
So how quickly is that gonna get done?
Jay, I can help jump in there.
Okay.
To answer this question, we've already implemented phase 1, which is immediate response program, boots on the ground. We have contractors fixing the equipment as we speak, which is essential to do the testing and the balancing. So the testing and balancing should start December, January. We have the controls contractors coming in to repair and test rooftop units this week as we speak, and then we'll go to the univents. So I'm confident to say probably the middle of January we can start testing and balancing into February, and should have all systems balanced and in place by the February break.
Okay, so because I'm not an expert on trying to determine whether between now and February break, how safe is it for these folks to be sitting in this classroom and our children to be there? I don't know that answer.
I want to be clear, this is not unsafe. It's just a
Okay.
matter of, are we introducing enough fresh air from the outside,
Yeah.
as opposed to recycling air that's in the
Right.
rooms itself. So, like, there are, again, short-term measures that can be taken. And I know even on the controls, like, they're going through and actually seeing, should we open the dampers more to have more fresh air come in? You know, there are people on their own that actually do, open the windows to let more fresh air in. Even, when a class isn't there, so a class goes out to
Right.
a different area and the room's open, teachers might open the windows to get some fresh air into the building. Obviously, you're not gonna do that if you get a whole classroom of kids there, because it gets cold, but there are different measures along those lines, that are already taking place. But I think what you're gonna see, again, even just between now and, we were talking about over the Christmas break, when the contractors are in, if a system happened to be just not on, during the day that they happen to be there, and they turn the fan speed on, again, you've got the air circulating, it's just not balanced to be 100% of what you wanna have coming in from the outside as opposed to being recirculated within the rooms. And that's what's gonna take a little bit of time. This isn't a one-time fix, though, so I think, and again, Jess had mentioned this earlier, even once we balance this once, it's not like it's gonna be balanced and you never come back to it. You have to continually come back because things, again, do fall out of calibration. You have to readjust based on the load, how many people you have in a classroom, things along those lines. So this is gonna be an ever-evolving thing, and we're gonna have to regularly, like we did back in 2017, we had groups come in, that was only a few years ago, and adjust the system. So we even know since then, some things have fallen out of adjustment. We might have rooms that have more air than we wanted to, and other rooms that have less air than we wanted to. So we may have to get in a more regular pattern of doing this adjustments, but it's not just like a one-time thing where you'd say, all right, next Monday something's fixed and we're not gonna have to deal with it again. It's gonna be a constant cycle of kind of updating and refreshing and rebalancing the system.
Okay, but we're doing this during a time when we have COVID and the potential transmission of this virus through the air. So, we're doing this, this report has been done in part because we want to make sure that we have sufficient new air coming in, correct, into every room and so
We
on.
wanna make sure that the system is balanced, that based on the current standards and recommendations, obviously in a COVID situation, that we have the right filtering, that we have the right amount of outside airflow coming in. Yes, correct, that's why we were doing this.
That's why we're doing it. So, we don't, at this time,
We don't what?
have the right amount coming in into every room,
Every room is not balanced. We have air coming in.
right?
We're not 100%, we're never gonna be 100% though,
I understood.
right?
So what is the threshold? What is the percentage we want to get to in every room that we're going to, because I think what I've heard is that if we don't get to a certain percentage in a particular room, then we're going to ask people to move out of that room and go into a different room.
No.
No.
What we're gonna be doing is going in and again, setting each of the rooms to say that 100%. Now, there's gonna be a 5% above, 5% below, like, there's always gonna be a window that they're in. What we're talking about is, if there's equipment in the classroom, or equipment service in the classroom that physically is broken, right?
Uh-huh.
That might be a situation where you have to move someone to a different room. Not if you're balanced within 5 or 10% of the target, that's gonna be fine. You're not
What is the target?
100%.
Okay.
The target's gonna be trying to get to 100%, again, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone along these lines, but you're gonna have that, margin of error on either side. It's in a situation where, again, mechanical failure, something just isn't working, or a control issue, the mechanics are working fine, but there's something wrong with the controls, it's not telling the equipment to work, well, you might have to move someone to a different room.
Okay.
Correct me if
Yeah,
not
I
wrong.
think the other thing that's important to point out is that with this increased service program, that as soon as equipment breaks down, we're getting somebody into the classroom to fix the mechanisms and the controls, which will really help improve any sort of breakdown and an instantaneous response on the short term.
Right.
Okay.
I was looking at it from the same perspective, I think, as Maria, and, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but at the end of the day, I think that just people want the bottom line, you know what I'm saying? And because this is a lot of great information, and I think this is going to really, I'm excited that we're, already this far into it, in terms of having received the information, knowing what we need to do through phase 1,
Right.
and getting into phase 2. But, I think the average parent or resident just wants, are we good to go? And I also want to say that the rebalancing for the airflow is one aspect of everything that we're doing. to deal with the whole COVID issue. 'Cause
Right.
we're still defogging at night and doing all of the other things that we need to be doing, so.
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad this
mean-
piece is coming online, but you see what I'm saying about just
Right.
like, you know, this is a lot of information.
Yes.
That, you know, most people
Right.
may not take the time to read or even necessarily understand it. I think I was on my third time before it kind of started to sink in.
Right.
And they just want to be reassured.
Right, like I think as I said in the beginning, this is one of the pieces of the pie that has to be factored into the overall equation of what you're doing as a town and the district. This is the engineering controls portion of that big picture that you're dealing with. So, you know, the social distancing and the PPE is paramount to keeping everyone as safe as possible. So what you're dealing with here isn't unique. Unfortunately, it's not unique. We see this a lot, and we see the situation you're in, you know, almost everywhere. So I think as long as you're doing the best you can with what you have, and coupled with the keeping people away from each other and wearing masks, et cetera, then you're doing the best that you can with what you have. And these steps we're talking about here will only make it that much better. And I think it's just be a matter of time before we get there with the next steps we're taking.
It might take, it's not, the report isn't saying our buildings aren't safe, but they're not optimized. They're not as good as they could be. They're not up to the standards that are being recommended by all these different organizations. And that's what we're working to do, is get to those standards.
Right.
Okay. I appreciate that you put that in perspective. I think that that's important, and I think that that's what people are gonna be looking at. Putting that in some perspective in terms of where we are and doing the best that we can under the circumstances, but at the same time trying to optimize, and what the town is doing is bringing in additional people to get it to that point as quickly as possible, and it looks like February may be what it is. Thank you.
And I guess, just a question for Jay, is there any budget implications that we have to be concerned with on our part in terms of getting all this work done? And
Not necessarily in the immediate future. Again, we've had meetings with Tom Mangico, and he's aware of this, DPW staff. We're going to try to utilize existing fiscal '21 budget to deal with a lot of the short-term remedies that are there. We've used some of the CARES Act money that we've already received, say like buying some of the purifiers, which was an added step in some of the rooms that we know just don't have the systems that we need. There may be another round of, say, a CARES Act money that's going to come out in after the first of the year. That's possible. Some of the longer-term fixes that are just more like system enhancements or improvements likely will go into the capital funding. So again, as we know some of these numbers, even though we have projects that have been allocated to capital, there's potential that we may have to say, all right, well, this might need to be recommended over something else. So there's always play for that. But I think in the long run too, because we're actually coming into the fiscal '22 budgeting season very quickly, we may have to revisit some of these items in '23, '24, and '25 for the longer term, like upgrades to existing systems. Nothing that's not going to make them functional now, but that'll just make them even better in the long run.
all right, anybody else? All right, well,
No, Jess, this was a great
yeah,
report.
thank you, very, very
Thank
thorough
you.
report.
And thank you, Kathleen.
Great.
Appreciate
Yeah,
the
thank you for
opportunity.
Jess for joining, and all the DPW staff, and Paul, I appreciate it.
Everyone, this was a group effort, so thank you to everybody. If there are follow-up questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'll be happy to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
All
you.
right. Everyone, good night.
Good night.
thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Anybody need a break? You want like a 2-minute recess just to?
2-minute recess?
Yeah, all right, we'll
Yeah.
just do a 2-minute recess just so.
That's
people
a good
can- We've had
idea.
a couple of presentations, so. All right, we'll reconvene in 2 minutes.
The mic's still on.
state had approved.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna find the article too.
yeah, it's called, I'll tell you what it's called. It's called Free Meal or Attend Class.
Are they approved for some?
I guess here.
It's not as bad, but something was definitely up with the mic.
What was that kid running into class the last? Just move item 6 to the next item, so we have another person to speak here. So if everybody's okay with that, we're gonna move item 6
Oh, John.
to place
Yes.
4 for now.
Thank you. John Morris, our science coordinator, is back with us. If there's any questions, I might actually ask him to walk us through this. But we had a member in the community approach me last spring at some point as the pandemic was occurring, very interested in making a donation to the school department around setting up a kind of a science-based project within one of the schools. In talking to them a little bit, they ended up with the concept of creating a makerspace at Parker Middle School. And this individual, the action before you this evening is to accept the donation to be able to do this. I'll turn it over to John so that he can talk a little bit about the discussions that took place or what the thought process behind this is. And then if the school committee does vote to accept the gift, we'll obviously account for it properly, and then I'll send a letter on behalf of the committee to the individual thanking them for the donation. So John, do you maybe want to just talk a little bit about your interactions and you know, how this particular project came up and what might be part of it over at Parker?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So as Dr. Lang said, I was able to connect with an individual this past spring over the summer. And then this fall, we were able to have some deeper discussions about some ideas that I had to create more of a innovative, creative space within one of our middle schools. The individual who I was able to work with, Matt Fichtenbaum, was able to come up with a donation for us in the amount that I have in the memo tonight to school committee. Some of the items that we would purchase with this donation are some of the things that you've seen, like your typical crafting materials, designing materials, something to make a model, basically of anything you could think of, whether it be for a school project, just an idea a student has. And what's really nice about this is we actually surveyed all the students at Parker. We presented a survey out. We got about 40% of the students who responded of different materials and equipment they'd like to see in the space too. So some of the things you see on this list aren't just things that I've looked at from doing this in a previous district, but also looking at student and staff feedback of some items they'd like to see. I don't want to get too much into what will be in the space and how we use it afterwards, because Dr. Parks and I will be back in the spring to give another update once we have these materials in, and hopefully, things considered, we get some students in there using it as soon as possible.
John, is this going to be like a dedicated room, or is it something that's going to be in some teachers' rooms, or?
Great question. So I actually have I've been working with Bill Silva in terms of looking at a certain space, and Dr. Parks is coordinating with us. So at this time, we're narrowing down one of 2 permanent spaces where this would be. And the reason for that is so that it'd have a little bit more visibility, and that way it could be used by different classes throughout the day versus just having everything within one room.
Any other questions people have?
I think I'm going to be asked this, so I'm going to ask you. What is it, Parker, for a particular reason? And if there's another person who's interested in donating money and creating another space, would that be something to do at the other middle school?
Absolutely. And even though this will be at Parker to start off, that does not mean that we won't try to have a way for McCarthy students after school to come over and use it as well. I know that we've had students use both buildings, whether it be for plays or productions. But yes, I would love to look at this space over at Parker as a way to iterate the process a little bit and make this a model of what is working, what's really working well. So that way, when we do go to do this over at McCarthy, we have a little bit of a product and a baseline of how it works at Parker for a short period of time, so we can expand this and have it accessible to both schools simultaneously.
And one other question, is there, so we have the materials, we have the space. Is it gonna be, is there somebody overseeing this? Is there an advisor for this group? How does this work? Is this part of clubs and activities? What is it?
Great question. So there's several different layers you could have to this. I think the first layer is that speaking with some of the staff over at the middle school now, is there's an interest with the staff to use the space where in other times they might, or other projects or labs they've had where they said, you know, we wish we had a space where kids could create different things, or we had different materials to come up with a different idea or a different way to show their idea. So we have staff interest with this, and I think it doesn't not necessarily have to be strictly a science teacher who would use this. I've had teachers from other departments say, you know, I heard you were going to have this piece of equipment in there. I'd love to have a meeting with students after school, or if there's going to be a quote unquote maker club, maybe like Maker Mondays after school that a staff could oversee, or multiple staff could oversee with a rotation. And again, it's definitely something that, at first I think people say, what do I do in here? How do I use some of this stuff? But once you see the energy that you can have out of the space, it's definitely tremendous.
Okay.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Just thank you, John, for pursuing this, and thank you for
Thanks,
the
John.
family for the generous donation. So, get to this point, we need a motion to accept.
I recommend the school committee approve the gift donation of $6,000 from the Fichtenbaum family as presented in the spreadsheet for purchases provided by Mr. Morris.
Second.
Okay, any further questions or discussions? All in favor? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John, for
John.
joining us. All right, we can go back in order on the agenda. Let me actually shut the link down, because that was our last presentation of the night that we're going to need the computer for. So item number 4 on the agenda this evening is just a budget transfer. We really do try at the end of each quarter to bring any transfers to you that would result in accounts needing your approval. So I'm going to ask Joanna just to review the one transfer with you. It's a small one this evening.
Thank you. There's just one budget transfer, and this has to do with lane changes. We had budgeted one line item for $108,985 at the beginning of the budget, fiscal '21, and you had already transferred $84,290 back in September, back into the several different labor accounts based on the staff member who achieved a higher degree, bachelor's to master's and on up. There's just one more before you, same thing, from this one account, the lane change account, into the particular labor account. After this transfer of $6,998, the account will still have a favorable balance of $17,697.
Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, take a motion.
I recommend the school committee vote to approve the FY 2021 local operating budget transfer of $6,998 from the salary reserve lane change account to the one labor account as presented.
Second.
Okay, anybody else, questions or anything? Okay, Donna?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 5 this evening is just a little update from Dan Hart, our athletic director over at Chelmsford High School. Obviously, things were in flux a little bit during the winter sports season. We're now going to be entering the winter sports season. Several of the sports that traditionally would run in the winter have been pushed to that floating season to take place later in the winter, or what's normally the spring season. So at this point in time, the sports that the high school is planning to offer include boys and girls basketball, hockey, and ski, as well as the girls gymnastics team and the boys swimming team. So these are the sports that the high school is considering or is planning to field at this point in time. Obviously, the MIAA and different health groups have come up with modifications to the sports that are going to have to be enacted, and Dan had put together his kind of protocols and procedures for the winter, so I just attached that for you. Tryouts are going to be beginning this week. Again, we're hoping, even if it's modified like the fall, to try to get a season in this winter. The only thing I wanted to flag for you is to start a discussion. You don't have to take action tonight, but at least have it on the radar, is in the event at some point, this winter, we were ever to go as a district fully remote and not be able to offer in-person learning, the committee would be required to vote if you want to allow sports to continue. So if we ever were in a situation where we had to go fully remote during the academic day and the sports teams still were going to be able to compete, both practice and play games, you as a committee would have to vote to allow that. That was a rule that the DESE and I believe the MIA put in this past fall. So again, while we don't have to deal with it right now because we do have schooling going, in the event we ever were to go remote, that is something that has to be in consideration.
So practices are starting this week. When is the competition supposed to start?
Well, would normally, yeah, and I actually did put a little memo in there. The superintendents met and kind of agreed throughout the MVC on some dates. So what typically would happen is winter sports start the Monday after Thanksgiving. So that's always when they hold the practices. The games would normally start, second, third week in December and run right through like February break. But under this particular scenario, we were coming late off the fall season. There was just a little bit of a concern because different communities were doing different programs. Some are almost fully remote. Some have hybrid going on. Some are making transitions in programs. We as a group wanted to basically have there be some continuity. So we said that practices and tryouts would start no earlier than this week. That we would allow that to happen. We would get back after the first of the year so that any competitions that get scheduled wouldn't happen until the week of January 11th. Those were the earliest, the dates that these events can happen. And then obviously the competitions would be running through about February vacation because I think that last week in February, first week in March is when that floating season is kicking in. I think there's a lot of, obviously, thought that's gone into if we do hold competitions to try to keep schools together so that like if we're going to play a particular community, we're going to play all their sports in that 1 week. So if a community does happen to not be able to compete, all of our teams would be offline that week, or we could go find another school that could play us and we could flip-flop, but it wouldn't be we're playing, Methuen on Monday and Drake on Tuesday and someone else on Wednesday to try to keep the sports together by community. So that was the thought process behind this. Because some of these sports are indoors as opposed to obviously outdoors. There will be no spectators allowed at the events. It was just one more element that couldn't be controlled, with adding just outside bodies, not only our own adults, but adults coming in from other communities. So these certainly are different and different protocols than we've had previously on sports. But this is what, as a group, we really felt were the some of the timelines we had to adhere to, some of the modifications that would have to take place to be able to play. And that's what you have before you tonight, just as an update.
Do we want to have a discussion about what we would do if we have to go fully remote? Do we want to?
I'd like to wait at this point on that particular thing. I mean, I guess there's a couple of concerns I have. Well, first of all, are the Merrimack Valley Conference superintendents still meeting weekly to kind of, because this is a proposal, but I remember through the fall things were changing on a weekly basis, if I'm not mistaken, because some schools
Right.
had gone into the red category that
Right.
they were using at that particular time, and so there was some adjusting. Is that still gonna happen?
We do still meet, not only just about athletics, but just like other things that are happening in districts, pretty much on a weekly basis. So usually Friday mornings, we do talk. This was basically just trying to have there be some uniformity of communities. We can't dictate in Chelmsford what another community will do. They can't kind of tell us what to do. But we wanted to try to not have there be infighting between the athletic directors and the principals, because sometimes it can be very contentious in communities. It's not here, but it can be in other communities. And we just said, we need to just have some early and start dates on when we compete, when practices would begin. So that's really all that this is doing. The revisions to the sports, what kind of accommodations they have to make, that actually comes from the either the MIA or there's a health group that's associated with the MIA, if I get their acronym. But they basically dictate what the schools have to do to comply if they're going to perform.
So, I mean, my only concern is this, right, is that, we're seeing the positive cases go up, we're seeing the hospital admissions go up, we're seeing the number of deaths go up, and we're introducing the sports season. And I don't want it to sound tone deaf, do you know what I'm saying? In light of everything else that's going on, that we're proposing that we have athletics. Now, that being said, I can understand the necessity for it, and I think that whatever we can do to help, bring some normalcy to kids' lives, to be able to, get them out, address some of the mental health issues that we're seeing and things like that, so much the better. But I don't know, it just feels a little off to me, for lack of a better way to put it, that, in light of everything that's happening right now, that we would even be considering a sports season. So that's why I want to know if we were meeting on a weekly basis to kind of evaluate things as we go through the season, so that if at any point it becomes, not safe, that we're just going to be able to say, okay, we're done.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been no statewide decree about whether you can or you can't have sports. And I think absent that, it's basically a community decision with regard to what you do. I think the Merrimack Valley group, really the athletic directors and were the key people throughout the course of the fall, did do a very nice job of kind of managing the sports that they could manage, giving kids the opportunity to compete. And I think a lot of the thought process that went into it also is kids are going to compete one way or the other. That if they're competing on a school team and we can actually have some controls in place and some regulations that we can look to and enforce, it may stop kids from going to compete in some of the private teams where we really have no control over, who they're exposed to. Are they wearing masks? Are they doing whatever the sports recommendations are? So this at least provides some controls to us. And again, there's been so much kind of stripped from kids as far as, what school is like and whatnot. This is a nice out, and it still provides for that nice connectivity to both the school and the team and the peers. Like I said, I do think the ADs and everyone, the coaches, did a nice job this past fall trying to make it workable. It's obviously going to be more difficult doing it in an indoor environment than opposed to most of our fall sports were outdoors. But I don't think as a group of superintendents, any of us really thought that we should just wholesale say, no, there shouldn't be a season, but it should be, is it safe? Can it be done properly? And almost on a week-to-week basis, based on what's happening within a community, make that decision.
And having had, the volleyball coach was in my room, my daughter coach. When something was going wrong in a community, that was it. They shut down, the games got canceled. So I can attest to the fact that they were, on a weekly, daily basis, they were making adjustments if they needed to make adjustments, so.
Right. I just want to reassure people that we're doing that.
Yeah.
But, to your point, and I don't disagree, my kids played sports, I played sports in high school. I think it's an important part of, the high school experience. But, that being said, I wish this much time and effort was being put into things like some of the fine arts programs that we've had to eliminate. Because, we have kids who may not participate in sports, but whose after-school activities or involvement in other clubs and activities is just as vitally important as, athletics are to some of our student athletes. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, but, I don't want to neglect them either.
Right.
Just because we have the MIAA that can kind of oversee this, I don't know that if there's
Yeah, I can't speak to specific fine arts groups and what they're doing. I know the groups that are associated with our different outside of school activities are still trying to maintain
Yes.
those connections and maintain those opportunities for kids. A lot of them happen to be remote, so
Yes,
that they're
yeah.
still working remotely. But there's not like an organized MVC type group for some of those fine arts programs. But obviously, we still want that activity to happen and support it. I think a lot's just happening virtually right now
Right.
instead of in person.
Right. And whatever we can do to, I think, as a committee to support the efforts of our staff to bring these activities or make them available to kids, I think that's what we need to do.
So, going down that road of asking about the sports season, it looked like the last time we had a sports season that a lot of students who were in the high school in hybrid then just went remote because they didn't want to go into quarantines and so on. What's going to be the policy this time going forward in terms of students participating in sports and going hybrid or going remote, or what's going to be the impact?
I don't fully know what the impact will be. I can tell you there was really no policy that told people to go remote or stay hybrid. I think the practical element of the students kind of kicked in, and after there were a couple of positive COVID cases at the high school, kids who were on sports teams realized, even if I'm not positive, and we have a more strict definition of a close contact than even like the CDC and even the Board of Health would require us to, that they may find themselves labeled as a close contact and be prohibited from playing for a couple of weeks. A lot of them then opted to go remote.
That's right.
And we can't force kids to come into in-person learning, but it's difficult to stop them from going remote. And I think what happened, what the high school saw is a lot getting ready for this winter season. Remember we did our transition after Thanksgiving, that if kids wanted to switch their models, if they wanted to go from hybrid to remote or the other way around, we tried to do that around Thanksgiving. I believe a lot of the athletes who anticipated playing winter sports, who didn't want to be identified as a close contact potentially, opted to go remote. So they're likely already in a remote status.
Okay, so this, keeping in the full activity spectrum and offering it to everybody and not just to sports. So let's say somebody is in another activity. They're doing the film, which is in replacement of the play in many ways. And they want to make sure that they can go on, that usually on a weekend, it's an extra activity. They decide, I'm going to go remote for 2 weeks because I want to make this date to get filmed. Is that allowed?
No, again, I'd have to ask the high school how they're dealing with that. This is not meant to just go remote for 2 weeks and then come back. These students have elected to now go remote, basically through the winter, through the second term. I don't know if the high school will say again, we'll do something different for third term. I'd have to ask them how they plan on handling it. It's not intended to be just, on again for a week, off again for a week. But this
Okay.
is like a commitment basically for the term, for the season.
Okay, so the commitment now to go remote or hybrid has been made for the second term.
Right around the second term, because again, the elementary, the middle, and the high school dates were slightly off. So it was very close to Thanksgiving, so we just said when you come back from Thanksgiving, that's kind of the group that's the program you're picking.
And so the next time that somebody can make that choice is when?
I mean, at the high school, I'd have to see the dates whenever the,
Yeah,
the
does it
second
coincide
term
with
would.
this season?
I don't know that it's 100% gonna line up,
halfway in the
because
country.
now we have what are they calling that extra season?
Fall two.
The
Fall
fall
two,
two season.
Yeah,
But
so-
it would fall in the middle of the winter season.
Yeah,
October.
so it's something to consider because it does have an impact and people should think it through when making that decision. And it's gonna be important to evaluate it on a regular basis. And I agree 100% that anything you can give these teenagers that is okay to do and still keep everybody else safe, I would go for it. Activities, period. Because insanity is not too far off, and everybody's feeling extremely pressured right now. The news that's out there and so on. So making this decision at this time, in the midst of what I'm hearing from a lot of people, it does make me a bit concerned. And I would want it to be reviewed pretty regularly.
Well, like I said, for my level, I do, just about on a weekly basis, talk with the other superintendents in the area to see what's happening in the districts. Do they have any concern? And, I mean, we had a concern ourselves last fall, where we had to tell a district, well, they were actually physically driving to us, that, you know, turn around, we're not gonna have you on site this year. We had other districts we didn't go to, because they had something going on. So we're very honest with each other as far as, we don't wanna have obviously spread a risk within our own community, but we certainly don't wanna invite another community in to that. We don't wanna put ourselves in that situation. So as a group, I think we'll do a good job of managing that. This is flagged for you because even though I'm managing it on a day-to-day basis, in the event as a district, we ever went fully remote, then I'm out of it. The school committee has to vote to either allow sports to continue or not. And that's kind of when it's gonna fall to you.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is this discussion we want to have here and now or do the next meeting, but we do have to have it sooner rather than later because the season's starting. And so if we have to go remote Thursday, you know, for whatever reason, then we're gonna have to meet again and vote on it. I mean, so do we want to have that discussion now or we want to cross our fingers, hope till, you know, that nothing happens in the next week and a half, we come back on the 5th and we're basically voting for what happens after that point.
So, wait a minute, let me see if I understand fully what you're saying. What you're asking is whether we're going to have a discussion about whether we're gonna go remote.
No. If we go remote, if the high school goes remote or the district goes remote, we as a committee have to vote whether sports can continue.
Yeah,
So is that a
it's
discussion we
not
want to have?
remote right now.
I know that, Maria, but if they, say we have God forbid, an outbreak, and Thursday, Friday, we decide, you know, we can't, you know, we're gonna have to go remote for the rest of the time we're here, then sports, we have to make a decision whether sports are gonna continue or not. We're gonna have to meet and make that decision. So do we want that discussion now, or do we wanna hope for the best, wait for the 5th, and then have the discussion at that point?
I mean, at this point, I feel like we're already having the discussion. I think
I
we're
guess
like,
that's my point.
Yeah, and just for clarity's sake, it's my understanding that the vote of the committee would really be more competition related.
Right.
Like, let's say we did have an outbreak, you know, next week even, right, when the teams would still be practicing. If there was something going on at the high school, you know, and Steve and Dan Hart would just shut things down until we got to a point where we could reassess things. The vote of the committee really comes into play more around the start date of the season when we'd be competing. It's whether you want to actually compete or not. There are some districts that are even talking about, you know, all right, if we had to just temporarily shut for a couple of weeks, maybe we just revert to only having practices, like we keep it within the school. We don't see other teams, we don't have other teams in, but we would just kind of practice and prepare and get ready for a competition. I know that happened in North Andover quite a bit this fall. Their numbers were skewed a bit from Merrimack's numbers, but they wouldn't go out and compete, but they still allowed their teams to practice and be ready, and then whenever they went back into session or whenever it was safe, they would then compete again. So I think, and again, you can do it tonight if you wanted to, but I just think it'd be more important that we probably take an action at the latest at the next meeting, but that things could change over the next couple of weeks too, even going into the holidays. This is like really the first week of even tryouts happening in communities. So I could report back to you what even just the feeling among the group is when we get back together in January. But I think that'd be the critical point is when competition starts.
Because there's two conditions under which we could possibly go remote. Widespread, virus in the community, right? Or staffing, right? Because, I mean, we can't get subs. We have people going out quarantining, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're positive. Right? So it could be one of those two reasons. I guess that was my concern about, you know, like, if it's a staffing issue, I'm not sure that should necessarily mean that sports should be canceled. If it's a widespread community issue, then I think that that's a different issue.
No, I agree. I don't disagree. I just wanted to know when we want to have the conversation, because we do have to have the conversation sooner rather than later.
There is a lot of context that goes into it, like you said. I mean, I don't think any of us would disagree. If this was a widespread community issue, even among teams, if we were having teams have positive players or even close contacts, I don't think any of us would say you continue. You'd have to shut down even temporarily at that point. There are a lot of districts, even like with their day-to-day program though, they're not necessarily, and we're not seeing spread within the schools themselves. Yes, we do have COVID cases affecting staff and students, but the cases, it's coming in from outside contact. It's not coming in from any contact within the schools. Again, I do speak to like our precautions that we're taking, the distancing, the masks, the hand washing, is resulting in when we identify and we over-identify close contacts, and they then go and get tested, they're coming back negative. Peggy is gonna update her numbers on this latest month and a half of data for us, just to, kind of hit that home. And I am gonna try to message that as we're getting ready to come back in school in January, just for the community, that this is what's happening. But we are being impacted by, say, a family member, right? So, a mother and a father, one of them, maybe works for us, the other doesn't, but the other ends up contracting COVID. The family has to self-quarantine. That person that works for us can't come to work. And it could hit a point where even though we're not having spread in the community, we can't fully staff our classrooms,
Right.
which would necessitate us going remote.
Right.
So that would be a situation, like you said, if it's not a COVID spread issue, but, the coach and the kids are still okay to play, would you want to not allow them to play just because we've made a blanket decision
Right.
saying there's no sports?
Right,
So
that's
that's where a
my
lot of
concern.
context does have to come into play.
All right, so we'll have that conversation next meeting, and then,
And I also, I would just put this out there to the committee. I think if something changes, then we need to meet sooner.
Yeah.
That's it, so.
I think it's reasonable.
I'm off Friday, after Friday.
Rub it
You didn't have to say that.
in.
All right. Anything else on sports? Any questions? Any more comments? Okay. We already did 6, so capital plan, we got anything with that? Or?
We're just going to ask Linda to give us a little update on the 2021, the MCAS assessment and the access testing that Bill had touched upon.
Okay.
Item 7.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
this won't take long.
Oh, I have an old copy, that's right. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I'm good.
Yep, go ahead.
So this shouldn't take long. So back at our November 17th meeting, I had given you an update about MCAS testing, specifically at the high school level, because obviously our current juniors, who were sophomores last year, did not take the spring MCAS, and it was pushed out for this next school year. And originally, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had given us our testing dates, which included the sophomores taking this test, both math and ELA, starting in January. So of course, we made a plan for it, we were ready to go, we talked about it at the meeting, I don't know, maybe 3 days later, we get the update from DESI that the juniors will no longer be taking the ELA mathematics starting in January, they're going to push it out until the spring. However, any seniors who have not taken the MCAS will still continue to take the MCAS testing in January, and they've extended it all the way till February. But I'll be honest with you, we only have 5 students that need to take that test. That's very simple for us to do. So this is good news because I know a lot of districts were struggling with it. Like I said, we had a plan. The only complication I see moving forward, and we'll take it when we get there, is that we would then be testing sophomores and juniors concurrently for the ELA and math, ELA and mathematics, yes, in the spring, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but at least we have a plan on how we're gonna at least get the students in there. This also affects our access testing for our L students. What they did is they extended the window from January to May. We felt that as a group, we got together and we talked at all of our council meetings. We are still going to test our L students in January with the access test, which we normally do. That's the typical time frame that we have to give them the testing, so that we don't further complicate any spring testing. And then this is kind of the plan that we've always had. Our L teachers have already reached out to the families to schedule this testing, so it gets a little bit more complicated if you try to change it again, especially if these students are not coming to school regularly, they're remote. So we've already made the plans on how we're going to do it, so we felt it would be best to keep plans the way it is for the access testing. The other good piece of the MCAS being moved is we weren't able to provide the students with the PSATs date on the 26th, and I know that was a concern for a lot of our parents. So Principal Murray, and I'll touch base with him tomorrow, but he has since reached out to the College Board to schedule that testing, and we're just waiting to hear back. He may have already heard back, I just haven't had a chance to speak with him. So MCAS moved to the spring, access testing staying the same, PSAT is coming back in.
How crazy will the spring be with the juniors and sophomores?
It could be, well, you know, I think of it in twofold. Like our middle schools do 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we do have like full schools that do it. It will just be a little bit more spacing that we'll need, and we'll just have to look at what dates they actually give us, because they did not give us the new testing dates.
We have expanded Wi-Fi outside the buildings.
We can put out some lawn chairs. I'm sure it will be great.
Take a test.
So,
Sure.
so Dr. Hirschford, how many people are impacted, how many students is it for the grade 12 testing?
5.
It's great.
I'm glad that they have left that window for access testing so wide open, because they have a lot to do with the speaking portion and
Right.
the written portion. That's good.
Any questions? Any other questions on this? Hopefully don't change it again.
Hopefully not.
Next up, I had just put a placeholder on the agenda. In the event we had to discuss anything with regard to capital, we really don't. I just presented the projects last Thursday night for consideration, so we reviewed those. We have our next capital meeting on Thursday night to kind of review the priority list from the members. Jeff's doing a wonderful job representing us in the committee. So I just put this on here in case we had a follow-up action from the last one. We don't. So we can really report out after Thursday's meeting what the recommendation is going to be.
Okay, and will the HVAC thing come into play in that?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess no, because that wasn't part of the prioritization that went forward, so I will be in communication with Paul to figure out how we might wanna tackle that. It's definitely gonna have to be updated for like years to come. I just don't know how we're gonna deal with it in the short term. But I will let you know. Item 9 on the agenda was just more for informational purposes. The town manager did email me and just asked to kind of put a placeholder on your calendars for Monday, January 11th at 7 for a tri-board meeting. And this will be really budget-related as we get ready for fiscal '21. So just kind of giving you that date. I know we shared it with the select board last evening.
I think you just sent us an article too about the outlook for the next fiscal year. I think it's in our email. Paul did.
Recently?
Yeah, tonight.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't read it yet.
Cautiously optimistic, they said.
I think you didn't read it yet.
When did it come in?
5:40 p.m.
Sorry, I was prepping
Sorry,
for
it's
this.
working.
But no, we'll take a peek at that, and I'm sure that'll be, we'll do our regular discussion on the 11th. Item 10 this evening is just your monthly report for personnel. Again, Maria actually alluded to this earlier. You know, this is our new hires, our resignations, retirement, and a couple of individuals who have changed roles in the district. It's just your kind of running list of personnel transactions. So just sharing that with you.
I know we did some rearrangements of positions like in technology and in HR. Have those been filled or changed?
No, the personnel I know is, I believe, just going to begin their review process soon. They haven't done anything yet. You know, one of the hires here in technology.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, so that's the computer hire.
Okay.
So remember we combined the 3 part-time jobs into the one
That's what I
full-time?
wondered.
Yeah, so Jason was the hire for that job.
Okay.
Your data analyst,
What's that?
the data analyst.
No, this one's in technology. This is the
I
computer
see.
repair technician. Remember, we had the 3 part-time, but we made 1 full-time, so that's what this one is. And again, just sharing that with you.
Any questions? Other questions?
And then the last 2 items of the evening for you. As you know, we're a member of the Valley Collaborative. Valley always sends us their annual report to share with the school committee members. They also send out a seasonal newsletter. They send out a fall and a spring newsletter. So I've just incorporated those in the packet for you. So you can read through those at your leisure, just to give you a sense of our partnership with Valley and how some of our kids are served there. So those 2 last reports from me are just informational purposes.
Thank you for doing that. A big plug for Valley.
Yeah, they're doing a great job.
Close to my family, so.
Yep.
All right, I think that's it, then, right?
That's
New
it for me.
items? Okay, anybody have any liaison reports? Jeff?
The CHIPS last week, the CHIPS PTO had a luncheon for the teachers and staff, and they also, for each classroom, had a donation of an Amazon gift card so that the teacher can buy supplies for the classroom. So the teachers are very thrilled about that. They also, today was the last day for their annual raffle, and last count, they sold 2,283 raffle tickets. Considering it was done virtually, they did, a wonderful job. As I always say, for a small group, and they don't stay long, it's like only a year or two because these children move on. They do a lot of really good work. And the next big thing will be they're shooting for February, their annual sock drive. So congratulations, people involved do a really nice job.
Anybody else have any liaison reports?
The PTO for Harrington did meet, and they had their holiday sale. I don't think they call it the holiday sale, but they had theirs, and it went very well. It was in collaboration with Byam. I also attended the McCarthy PTO meeting, and they talked about the fact that their recycle sale went extremely well. One of the key discussions at that meeting was the fact that activities, I believe, are starting up now for the middle schools. I think there are about 10 activities that are going to be offered, and it will bring some of the music things and so on back into the middle school a little bit more, which is good. They talked about what they're going to do going forward, and they're trying to find some activity that they can bring to the entire student body on a virtual basis. So the PTO is going strong there.
Anybody else have anything?
Council Friends of Music will be meeting this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Zoom. So.
Zoomed. Okay, great. Everybody good? Any other liaison reports?
Jeff and I are going to share this one again, the high school.
You have the details.
I'll talk about it, okay. So the high school, in collaboration with the PTO, they're sponsoring that grab and go. It's supposed to be Thursday, but I hear Thursday may not happen, I don't know, because of possible snow.
Yeah, the weather stuff.
So I believe then the next day it would happen if we have school in person. The incredible thing about this is that the parents who were interested in running this reached out to the community, and every single thing that's going to be part of this grab and go was given by parents of the high school students. And we're talking about quite a bit. There were 3 drop-off locations, and each one of the drop-off locations got tons of it's not really donations. They're giving because they want to. The other incredible part of it is that people gave cards and other raffle items, and there were a good number of them. So we're going to be able to, on that day, run a pretty good raffle too for the staff. And parents were very happy to see something going on where they could contribute to thank the staff at the high school.
All right, anybody have any new items? John?
Yeah, I think we've had a little bit of a discussion about this, and Donna and I, we probably were talking when we were during that recess. But, it's kind of come to our attention that our homeschooling population has increased, right? So there's I've been hearing a lot of feedback about food insecurity, and they don't have access to the Chelmsford school program necessarily. And there's also kids that aren't in school, so there's a lot of food insecurity, just generally speaking, in the community. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to share in some of our literature and some of the communications we put out, the projectbread.org information. I'm actually going to email it to you here in a second. So even if other parents hear of other parents that are having food insecurities, there's a food pickup at Neshoba that doesn't require an ID, doesn't require any kind of registration, where you can pick up between a certain time. And then there's other options in Lowell and Westford and Billerica for parents. And I just think it would be good to share with the community.
Yeah, the Merrimack Valley Food Bank.
Merrimack Valley Food Bank.
But maybe just even Jen Melanson too is another contact.
Yeah. Jen Melanson.
If you can just forward me like a feed or a link,
Yeah, I got you.
we can incorporate it into something.
And it's sent. I typed it 15 minutes ago. So, thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other items?
So, as we're thinking about going into Christmas break and, returning, I was wondering if we could get a report on, I don't know if we've had a lot more students go remote now that the numbers are going up. Like what is the ratio of hybrid to remote students?
Sure.
And also, do we have that tipping point where, we have so many staff out that, we need to think about going remote even if it's school by school? I don't know if that's something that we need to talk about, how we're going to handle that, because, I think the numbers have been increasing. I think we need to figure out what we're going to do in terms of staffing. And, then again, looking at the community numbers, I know the schools have been pretty good in terms of the positive cases, but, I do worry about the numbers increasing, and at some point, we know we're going to see something happening in the schools because there's just too many people that are testing positive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that, we have more positive tests, obviously, in the community. And as I mentioned earlier, like, we have families, that might test, that might impact us. So I think the staffing, potentially would be a concern. I think that would be handled on a school-by-school basis, because I don't think that would necessarily say you move a whole district remote because of what's going on. And that would be potentially even more of a short-term thing, where, if we didn't have enough bodies to safely run school, yes, that would have to be something we would consider. We, to date, I just want to make sure people watching know, like, we have not, again, been having spread in the schools. And I think if we maintain what we're doing, I think we'll be able to stop or limit that from happening. I think it's, for us, it's going to be more like the staffing piece of it. But yes, I'm happy to give you updated. We actually updated our numbers right after Thanksgiving, because that's when we did the plan change. So I can give you the breakdown from that particular time. And obviously, the staffing is something that we watch. That wouldn't necessarily be a vote of the committee to have a school go remote. I would do that on like a daily basis if something were to happen. Or we had an abundance of staff, almost like a snow day. Like we had abundance of staff not be able to be there. We can't safely operate school. We may have to say school A is going to be remote for 2 weeks. Everyone else is still, in person. But that would be like a one-off type situation.
No, I understand in terms of our rule, that wouldn't necessarily be under our purview, but I do think that, the community.
No, I just meant that you wouldn't have to convene to vote
Oh,
or
right,
anything like
yes.
that.
But I think the community and especially, the parents are, it's just stressful watching the news. And I think
Right.
people have questions and they have concerns, and I think that, whatever information we can get out about what's happening and what our plan is, I think the better off that we're going to be in alleviating some of those concerns.
I will tell you, just looking at the numbers though since Thanksgiving, we're not seeing people on a daily basis just switch from one model to another model. What we saw is at the high school, again, the student athletes in a group kind of did make those decisions. But we, again, from time to time, and we've told families, if you're not well, stay home. If someone in your house is quarantined, we still want you participating, just participate remotely for however long the quarantine is. So that is happening, but we're not seeing like big numbers just switching all of a sudden on a Monday because they're concerned from one to another. I think a lot of the staff, a lot of the parents who did have concerns had already picked remote as their option, and the ones that really did pick hybrid, for the most part, I think really do appreciate the couple of days a week that the kids are in school. And again, we're not seeing or witnessing any of that spread, but it's not to say we're not looking for it.
Are we seeing big disparities, though, in terms of, like you've got 2 kids sitting in front of you in class and everybody else is now remote?
Certainly not at the younger grade levels. As you go up the district, you see more of that. At the high school, again, I was there yesterday and I was there today. It's, there's no set way, but I mean, I'll walk by a classroom and see, some might have 2, 3, 4 kids in it. Depending on the level of the class, you might actually have, 10 or 11 kids in it. So it really does change. I think the other thing that's hard to quantify at the high school or at any of our schools is someone out because, say, they're concerned about what's going on, or are they out because of a contact? That they're a contact, or someone in the family is, and they're just being safe. I was at South Row on Friday, And I have to just put a plug in for them. I witnessed the whole pickup, which is an orchestra in itself. I mean, the rows of cars and how well it was done. I mean, those classrooms are full. You know, almost every seat that, you know, can be taken is taken, because I think the young kids really do value the in-person. And it's not to say that the middle of the high school don't. I think there's just different elements that are coming into play. Again, the sports is one, you know, that was a
They're a
concern
little
at the
more
high school.
independent too.
Yeah. But I'll be glad to provide that to you.
But I do, you know, like I said, I think that whatever we need to do to keep the community at large informed about, you know, what's happening and
Sure.
what our plan of action is, I think that's going to alleviate people's concerns.
Sure.
I would need to reaffirm that. I think that the number of comments and input that I'm receiving on people being concerned about what's going to happen, especially after we go through an additional holiday. And there has been some impact at the high school. I mean, I've gone through 4 quarantines with 2 kids at the same grade level, okay? So there's definitely an impact. It's not only that they are more independent, but they're also more aware in many ways of what's going on out there. And because they have a greater concern. So if they see that someone is out who, you know, may be a teacher, maybe an administrator, maybe any position in the school, they immediately question that. And I think that, you know, that communication needs to also go not only to us, the parents, but also even internally to the students themselves, because there are scared people right now. They're hearing a lot of news and they're concerned. And I understand that you would be the one who would make that decision, but I think it's important to make sure that that communication is presented so that everybody hears what's going on. And I know that you can't give out names and you can't give out, everybody knows that. But, you know, how are you making this decision, and at what point does that decision become, we're remote and we're remote in this school, or we're remote in that school, or whatever that is. And yeah, and there are concerns too about the staffing levels.
No, I hear them. I absolutely know what you're saying. And, I mean, when I've talked to people or I've emailed people, there's no hard metric to go by. I can't just say on this particular day, if this is what we're going to do. If we ever see the actual spread of COVID within the schools, that we have identified cases and, you know, we're identifying close contacts and the close contacts are coming down positive, we know that there's an issue. That would be an indicator that we need to look back, roll back, go to a full remote type scenario, even temporarily, to try to figure out what's going on. If that wasn't happening and we had a situation where we don't have spread, but we're not able to safely staff the buildings, that would be a different message, because we'd be explaining, you know, COVID's not the issue, it's directly within the schools, but we need to have X number of staff to properly run the schools, so we at least temporarily have to consider a remote option. Those are the 2 likely scenarios where we would probably find ourselves having to go remote. I can't think of another, like, one off the top of my head. But it's just very difficult, because I think there are some people that would like to just see, okay, if X happens, it's a guarantee. But there are so many just moving parts in this, and so many different data points that you have to look at in making that decision. That's what's truly difficult about it. But I think, again, even when I mentioned earlier, like, I'm asking Peggy to update for us the data on the number of cases and who's tested, so that, because I know people are going to be concerned coming back after the holidays, but I want to be able to message, again, here's our track record through the fall. You should feel safe, or you should feel comfortable because of, you know, X, Y, and Z. So I want to use that in the messaging.
Anybody else? Any new? I got a couple. I'll throw it at Linda.
Oh, great.
If at all, you know, in our January meetings or early February, any kind of update in terms of how the students are doing based on their testing. Bill mentioned iReady. this fall compared to last fall based on the fact that we didn't have the whole spring. If we have any sort of data about how that's looking, and
can do
then
that.
as far as this year, any sort of data in terms of how this year's students are doing in terms of their grades, because I've read multiple stories about a lot of students, more students failing and struggling than in the past. So if we have any kind of
Yeah, I can do that.
updates in terms of how our kids are doing, how they did weathering the spring, and then how they're doing, with our new normal.
No problem.
Right?
Yeah, there was that in rates of the pace of growth. They found that, I think English was okay, ELA, math was slower, a slower
Yeah,
pace.
right.
Who found that information?
I was another one of the many articles. that
Oh,
we had.
I was
There was an
you're not
article
talking
that
about
did
us.
say-
No,
there-
no.
Oh, that's
There
not,
was an article
okay,
about how
yeah.
ELA skills didn't deteriorate
Yeah.
too much, but the math skills
Math, yeah.
were a little bit high. So whatever we have for results, I mean,
Yeah, I would say after our second diagnostic testing,
Yeah.
that will definitely have, some data. We also have some historical data
Right.
to show the difference between how students were faring in the beginning of the year and multiple years compared to this year. So yeah, absolutely.
okay, great.
Oh, there was one other thing, Dennis. It was about the MASC Executive Board letter that came out. I don't know if people had a chance to see that, but I'm just saying, we did not see that ahead of time. And I don't know whether or not we would have approved it, but it came as a surprise to
It
me.
was the executive board, yeah.
It was the
wasn't the
executive.
members.
It was not representative of what we thought as a district. So, there was a lot of, I've heard a lot about it and from other school committees and whatnot. And, I think that, I haven't heard any feedback from anybody in Chelmsford, but I have heard it from other teachers in other districts who were just really unhappy. And it was, like I said, I think that it caught us off guard because I didn't see that coming, so. But.
Right. Any other items? Okay, anybody get any emails for public comment?
None.
I did not. Okay. All right, so if,
So I already said it.
What's
The comments I've been getting and so on are all about when are we gonna consider remote, or are
okay,
we
is
going
that during
to?
the meeting? Yeah, okay. All right, if there are no more issues, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Well, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Did you make it?
I did.
You did.
Oh, okay, sorry, second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that article.